White millionaire family mocked the black paralyzed woman at party. Then she canceled their $11 billion deal. Someone please get this thing out of the way before it ruins the entire evening. The words didn't just cut through the air. They gutted it. Naomi Ashford sat motionless in her wheelchair at the entrance of the grand ballroom, her midnight red gown shimmering under the chandelier light. She had been waiting for someone to move the velvet rope barrier so she could enter, a simple courtesy that had been extended to every other guest. But no one moved. They just stared. And then Vanessa Whitmore spoke again, louder this time, her voice dripping with theatrical disgust as she turned to her friends. "I'm serious. Who approved this? This is supposed to be an elegant event, not a," she waved her hand dismissively toward Naomi, "a charity case showcase." Laughter rippled through the cluster of guests near the entrance. Naomi's hands tightened on the armrests of her wheelchair. Her throat went dry. A man in a tuxedo, someone she didn't recognize, leaned toward his companion and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Christ, they really let anyone in these days. What's next, a petting zoo?" More laughter. Naomi felt her chest tighten, but she kept her face neutral. She'd learned long ago not to give people the satisfaction of seeing her break. She cleared her throat softly and said, her voice calm and polite, "Excuse me, could someone please move the—" "Oh my God, it talks!" Vanessa interrupted with mock surprise, clutching her chest as her friends burst into fresh peals of laughter. "I honestly thought you were one of those, what do they call them, props? You know, for the diversity photo op." Naomi's breath caught. It. She'd called her it. A waiter appeared then, a young man who looked horrified but too intimidated to intervene. He moved the rope slightly, but Vanessa stepped directly into the narrow opening, blocking Naomi's path. "Actually, sweetheart," Vanessa said, bending down so she was eye level with Naomi, close enough that Naomi could smell her expensive perfume and the champagne on her breath. "I don't think this event is really equipped for someone like you. You understand, don't you?" Her smile was saccharine, poisonous. "It's not personal. It's just that wheelchairs and marble floors and, elegance, they don't really mix." Someone behind Vanessa whispered, "Oh God, is she crying?" Naomi wasn't crying. Not yet. But her hands were trembling now, hidden beneath the folds of her gown. Then Margaret Whitmore appeared, gliding through the crowd like a queen surveying her kingdom. She took one look at Naomi, and her perfectly maintained expression flickered, just for a moment, with something that looked like revulsion. She quickly masked it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh dear," Margaret said softly, placing a hand on Vanessa's shoulder. "Vanessa, darling, don't make a scene." She turned to Naomi, her voice shifting into the kind of slow, overly enunciated tone people use with small children or the elderly. "Hello, sweetheart. Are you here with someone? A caretaker, perhaps?" Naomi opened her mouth to respond, but Margaret continued, not waiting for an answer. "Because if you're lost, we can certainly call someone to come pick you up. I'm sure this must be very overwhelming for you." She glanced at the crowd, lowering her voice conspiratorially but still loud enough for everyone to hear. "Poor thing probably wandered away from a group home or something." Naomi felt the room tilt. Poor thing. Group home. As if she were a child. As if she were incapable. As if she were nothing. A photographer from one of the society magazines stepped forward. Camera raised. "Mrs. Whitmore, can we get a photo of you with—" "Absolutely not," Margaret said sharply, her smile vanishing. "This is a private event for invited guests. Not a publicity stunt." She turned back to Naomi, her expression hardening. "Now I'm going to ask you politely one more time. Who brought you here?" Naomi's voice, when she finally found it, was barely a whisper. "I'm invited." My name is on the list. Vanessa laughed, sharp and cruel. Oh, sweetie, I seriously doubt that. Check the list, Naomi said, louder now, her voice shaking but firm. My name is Naomi Ashford. I don't care who you think you are, Margaret interrupted, her tone turning cold. You're causing a disruption. You're making my guests uncomfortable. She snapped her fingers at a nearby security guard. James, please escort this woman out. Quietly. The security guard hesitated. His face conflicted. Now, James, Margaret said icily. Naomi felt the world narrow to a pinpoint. She had been dismissed from rooms before. Overlooked. Underestimated. But never, never, had she been physically removed like trash. The guard stepped forward reluctantly. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to ask you to. Vanessa, emboldened by Margaret's authority, reached out and grabbed the handles of Naomi's wheelchair, and yanked it backward. Hard. Naomi gasped, her body jerking with the sudden motion. Her hands flew to the wheels to stabilize herself, but Vanessa was already pulling her toward the exit, moving her like a piece of furniture, like an object. Come on, let's go, Vanessa said brightly, as if she were doing Naomi a favor. Back to whatever little van brought you here. Phones came up. Dozens of them. Recording. Filming. Capturing every second of Naomi's humiliation. Someone in the crowd said, "Oh my God, this is insane." Another voice. Is someone going to stop this? But no one moved. They just watched. And filmed. And laughed. Naomi's vision blurred. Her chest heaved. Her whole body trembled with a humiliation so deep it felt like it was breaking her bones. And then Vanessa said the words that shattered her completely. She leaned down close to Naomi's ear and whispered, but loud enough for the people nearby to hear. Honestly, people like you shouldn't even be allowed out in public. You ruin everything. That was it. That was the moment Naomi's heart broke. Not from the words themselves, but from the casual cruelty in them. The ease with which this woman had reduced her entire existence to an inconvenience. Naomi closed her eyes. And for one terrible, endless moment, she believed her. She believed she didn't belong. She believed she was broken. She believed she was nothing. But then, her phone buzzed in the small bag attached to her wheelchair. A text from Claudia, who was somewhere in the building. Are you okay? I'm watching from the balcony. Say the word and I'm coming down. Naomi opened her eyes. And something inside her shifted. Not broke. Ignited. She reached into her bag with shaking hands, pulled out her phone, and pressed a number on speed dial. Vanessa was still gripping the wheelchair handles, still smirking. Margaret was already turning away, the problem handled. The crowd was still filming. The phone rang once. Twice. A voice answered. Calm. Professional. Ms. Ashford. What do you need? Naomi took a breath. And when she spoke, her voice was no longer shaking. It was steel. David, she said clearly, her eyes locking onto Margaret's retreating back. Cancel the Whitmore deal. Margaret froze mid-step. I'm sorry, Ms. Ashford. Did you say cancel? Yes, Naomi said, her voice rising now, cutting through the ballroom like a blade. The merger. The partnership. All $11 billion. I want every contract voided, every signature retracted, and every dollar pulled. Effective immediately. The room went silent. Not the awkward silence of before, but the kind of silence that comes right before an explosion. Margaret turned slowly, her face drained of all color. Vanessa's grip on the wheelchair went slack. Ms. Ashford, I need to confirm. You're terminating an $11 billion deal right now? I am. Understood. I'll begin the process immediately. Naomi ended the call. And for the first time since she'd entered that building, she allowed herself to look directly at Margaret Whitmore. My name, Naomi said, her voice soft but amplified by the absolute silence, is Naomi Ashford. I am the founder and CEO of Zenith Global Industries. She paused, letting the words settle like stones into water. The company that was going to save your dying empire. Margaret's mouth opened. No sound came out. Naomi's gaze shifted to Vanessa, who looked like she'd been turned to stone. You called me Annette, Naomi said quietly. You said people like me ruin everything. Her voice broke, just slightly, and a single tear slid down her cheek. You're right. I just ruined your entire future. She turned her wheelchair with slow, deliberate precision, and rolled toward the door. This time, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. No one laughed. No one spoke. No one moved. As Naomi passed, a woman in a designer gown whispered, "Oh my God! Oh my God!" A man dropped his champagne glass. It shattered. By the time Naomi reached the exit, Margaret Whitmore had collapsed into a chair, her face buried in her hands. Vanessa stood frozen, her phone still raised, the video still recording her own destruction. And Elliot Whitmore, standing near the back of the room, felt his entire world crack open beneath him. Outside, Naomi made it exactly 10 feet before she broke. A sob tore from her chest. Raw, violent, uncontrollable. Claudia was there in seconds, dropping to her knees beside the wheelchair, pulling Naomi into her arms. "I've got you," Claudia whispered, tears streaming down her own face. "I've got you, I've got you." They called me Annette, Naomi gasped between sobs. She said people like me shouldn't. I know. I heard. I saw everything. They pushed me, Claudia. She pushed me like I was. I know, baby. I know. Naomi collapsed into her friend's arms and wept, not because she regretted what she'd done, but because even after everything she'd built, everything she'd accomplished, she was still, in their eyes, less than human. And that truth was more devastating than any business deal could ever be. Before we dive into today's story, I want to give a huge shout out to all of you who've been liking, commenting, and sharing these stories. You don't know how much it means. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button because trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. Now, I want you to drop in the comments right now. Where are you watching from? What city? What country? Let's see how far this community reaches. And stick around because today's story, this one's going to hit differently. Now, let's continue. The suite at the Meridian Estate was a sanctuary of understated luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Atlantic Ocean, where the late afternoon sun painted the water in strokes of amber and gold. Cream silk curtains drifted gently in the breeze from the partially open balcony door. A crystal vase held white peonies, their fragrance soft, clean, expensive. Everything in the room whispered wealth, but not the loud, desperate kind. The kind that didn't need to prove itself. Naomi Ashford sat before the vanity mirror, studying her reflection with the calm, assessing gaze of someone who had learned to armor herself in perfection. Her gown was midnight blue, Italian silk that caught the light like water, custom tailored to drape elegantly over her seated frame. The bodice was fitted, the skirt flowing, designed specifically to look stunning whether she was standing or sitting. Because Naomi would never stand again. And she'd made peace with that. Mostly. Her locks were swept into an intricate updo, woven with thin gold thread that glinted when she moved her head. Diamond studs, small, flawless, inherited from her grandmother, sat at her ears. Her makeup was flawless. Deep berry lips, subtle contour, a hint of gold on her lids that made her dark brown eyes luminous. She looked powerful. She felt terrified. "Naomi, final check," said Claudia, stepping into the room with her ever-present tablet. Claudia was in her early 40s, silver streaking through her natural hair, her energy brisk and protective. She'd been Naomi's right hand for 6 years, longer than most marriages lasted. The Whitmores confirmed the announcement is happening at 8:30. That gives you 90 minutes to arrive, settle in, and position yourself before they go public with the merger. Naomi nodded, her fingers smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her gown. Security briefing? Done. Accessibility has been confirmed. Ramps, clear pathways, accessible restroom. The venue coordinator assured me 3 times that everything is set. Claudia paused, then added more gently, "You don't have to do this in person, you know. We could send a representative. No one would question it." "I would question it," Naomi said quietly. "I know." Claudia sat on the arm of the nearby sofa. "But you've been working 16-hour days for 3 months to close this deal. You're exhausted. And these people." She trailed off, but they both knew what she meant. These people don't see you the way you deserve to be seen. Naomi met her own eyes in the mirror. She'd heard it all before. So inspiring. "You're so brave. I don't know how you do it." As if simply existing in a wheelchair made her a hero. As if her accomplishments were impressive considering her limitations, rather than impressive, period. She had built Zenith Global Industries from nothing. A green energy tech empire valued at over $40 billion. She held patents in solar innovation, battery storage, and sustainable infrastructure. She'd been named to Forbes 30 Under 30 and Time's 100 Most Influential. She employed over 30,000 people across 4 continents. But in rooms like the one she was about to enter, she knew what they'd see first. The chair. Not the woman in it. "I'm going," Naomi said firmly. "I didn't build this company by hiding." Claudia smiled. "No, you didn't." Naomi transferred smoothly from the vanity chair into her wheelchair. A sleek, custom-built model in matte black carbon fiber with chrome accents. It wasn't medical equipment. It was an extension of her, designed by one of the top mobility engineers in the world. Lightweight. Responsive. Beautiful. She adjusted the hem of her gown, checked her small leather bag attached to the side of the chair, and took a breath. "Let's go build an empire," she said. Claudia grinned. "Let's go expand an empire. You already built one." As Naomi's accessible van pulled away from the Meridian, 3 miles across the estate grounds, Margaret Whitmore was coming undone. She stood in the center of the grand ballroom, a space so opulent it bordered on obscene. Vaulted ceilings painted in gold leaf. Chandeliers imported from Vienna. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine. Every detail curated, controlled, perfect. Just like Margaret herself. At least, that's what the world was supposed to believe. But beneath the champagne-colored Oscar de la Renta gown and the 3-strand pearl necklace, beneath the flawless hair and the practiced smile, Margaret Whitmore was drowning. "Mother, the seating chart is wrong again," said Elliot, her eldest son, appearing at her side with a clipboard. At 43, Elliot had the kind of understated handsomeness that came from good genes and better tailors. But there was a softness to him, a hesitancy that his father had spent years trying to beat out of him. It hadn't worked. "Then fix it," Margaret said without looking at him. "I've tried. Vanessa keeps moving people around because she doesn't want to sit near the Castellanos. Something about a social media feud." Margaret closed her eyes. "Tell Vanessa that if she changes that seating chart one more time, I will personally seat her in the kitchen." Elliot hesitated. "She's already upset about." "I don't care." Margaret's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "Tonight is not about Vanessa's Instagram drama. Tonight is about saving this family. Elliot fell silent. Because they both knew the truth. Whitmore Global was dying. 150 years of legacy, wealth and power, reduced to a house of cards held together by desperation and lies. Bad investments. Over-leveraged properties. A shipping division gutted by newer, faster competitors. A media empire made obsolete by digital platforms they'd been too arrogant to invest in. The Whitmore fortune was gone. Not all at once, but slowly, steadily, like blood leaking from a wound no one wanted to acknowledge. And tonight's gala, this glittering, expensive performance, was their last chance. The merger with Zenith Global Industries was the only thing standing between the Whitmore name and complete ruin. $11 billion. Enough to pay off their debts, restructure their holdings, and buy them another generation of relevance. If it went through. Margaret had never met Naomi Ashford in person. All negotiations had been handled through intermediaries. Lawyers, bankers, consultants. She knew the basics. Young, self-made, black, brilliant, and disabled. Margaret told herself it didn't matter. But late at night, when she was alone with her thoughts, she felt the discomfort creeping in. The unspoken questions. Would she fit in? Would the guests know how to interact with her? Would it be awkward? Margaret had silenced those thoughts with practiced efficiency. This was business. The world had changed. She'd adapted. Hadn't she? Mother. Elliot's voice pulled her back. The photographer wants to know if you're ready for pre-event shots. Margaret smoothed the front of her gown and lifted her chin. Yes, she said. Let's begin. 15 minutes later, Vanessa Whitmore stood in front of a full-length mirror in one of the estate's powder rooms, adjusting her gown for the 5th time. She looked perfect. She always did. Blush pink Valentino. Hair in effortless waves. Skin glowing from a facial she'd gotten that morning. At 36, she'd married into the Whitmore family expecting a life of ease, luxury, and Instagram-worthy moments. Instead, she'd gotten debt, stress, and a husband who seemed more interested in reading than networking. She pulled out her phone and snapped a selfie, adjusting the angle to catch the chandelier behind her. Caption. Charity Gala ready 2 heart sparkles #blessed #Hamptons #Whitmore. She posted it and watched the likes roll in immediately. Her followers didn't need to know the truth. That the dress was borrowed. That the estate was being sold. That tonight was a performance to save a sinking ship. A knock at the door startled her. Vanessa, we need you in the ballroom, Elliot's voice called. She rolled her eyes. Coming. She gave herself one last look in the mirror, practiced her smile, and stepped into the hallway. Tonight she would play her part. She always did. At exactly 7 p.m., Naomi's accessible van pulled up to the Whitmore Estate's grand entrance. The driver lowered the ramp, and Naomi rolled out smoothly onto the cobblestone driveway. The estate loomed before her, sprawling, intimidating, beautiful in the way that old money always was. She took a breath. Claudia had gone ahead to coordinate with the event staff, so Naomi was alone. Exactly the way she wanted it. She rolled toward the entrance, where a young valet stood holding the door open. He smiled politely, professionally, and stepped aside to let her pass. Inside, the sound of a string quartet drifted through the air, mingling with the low hum of conversation and the soft clink of champagne glasses. Naomi moved through the marble foyer, her wheels gliding smoothly over the polished floor. And then she reached the ballroom entrance, where everything went wrong. A velvet rope stretched across the doorway, a decorative barrier meant to create a grand entrance moment for arriving guests. Normally, staff members unhooked it and welcomed people in. But when Naomi approached, the young woman managing the entrance froze. She stared at the wheelchair, then at Naomi. then back at the wheelchair. The woman said, her smile faltering. Just one moment. She didn't unhook the rope. She just stood there. Naomi waited. 5 seconds. 10. Guests behind her began to notice. A few whispered. One couple stepped around her, and the staff member immediately unhooked the rope for them, smiling brightly. Then rehooked it, leaving Naomi on the outside. "Excuse me," Naomi said politely. "Could you please?" "Oh my God, just move," a voice snapped from behind her. Naomi turned slightly. Vanessa Whitmore stood there, flanked by 2 equally polished women, all holding champagne glasses and wearing expressions of thinly veiled annoyance. "You're blocking the entire entrance," Vanessa continued, louder now. "Some of us actually have places to be." Naomi's stomach tightened. "I'm just waiting for—" "Seriously?" Vanessa turned to her friends, her voice dripping with theatrical exasperation. "Who approved this? This is supposed to be an elegant event, not a—" she waved her hand dismissively toward Naomi, "a charity case showcase." Her friends laughed. And just like that, the night began to unravel. Naomi sat frozen as more guests gathered, forming a small crowd near the entrance. A man in a tuxedo leaned toward his companion and muttered, loud enough for Naomi to hear, "Christ, they really let anyone in these days. What's next, a petting zoo?" Laughter rippled through the group. Naomi's hands tightened on the armrests of her wheelchair. She opened her mouth to speak, to explain, to assert herself. But Vanessa stepped directly in front of her, bending down with exaggerated slowness, as if addressing a child. "Sweetie," Vanessa said, her smile saccharine and cruel, "I don't think this event is really equipped for someone like you. You understand, don't you?" Naomi's throat went dry. "Someone like you. It's not personal," Vanessa continued, straightening. "It's just that wheelchairs and marble floors and, elegance, they don't really mix." More laughter. Phones came out. Cameras turned. And Naomi felt the room closing in around her. Then Margaret Whitmore arrived. She swept through the crowd with the grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime commanding rooms, her expression shifting from confusion to something that looked disturbingly like revulsion when her eyes landed on Naomi. She masked it quickly. Too quickly. "Oh dear," Margaret said softly, her voice taking on that slow, overly enunciated tone. "Hello, sweetheart. Are you here with someone? A caretaker, perhaps?" Naomi's heart sank. "I'm a guest," she said quietly. "My name is—" "Because if you're lost," Margaret continued, not listening, "we can certainly call someone to come pick you up. This must be very overwhelming for you." She turned to the crowd, lowering her voice conspiratorially but still loud enough to be heard. "Poor thing probably wandered away from a group home or something." The words hit Naomi like a physical blow. Poor thing. Group home. As if she were incapable. As if she were broken. As if she were nothing. Naomi tried to speak, but her voice wouldn't come. And then Vanessa did the unthinkable. She reached out, grabbed the handles of Naomi's wheelchair without asking, without permission, and yanked her backward. Hard. Naomi gasped, her body jerking with the sudden motion. "Come on, let's go," Vanessa said brightly, pulling Naomi toward the exit like she was moving a piece of furniture. "Back to whatever little van brought you here." Phones lifted. Recording. Filming. Capturing every moment of Naomi's destruction. And then Vanessa leaned down and whispered, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "Honestly, people like you shouldn't even be allowed out in public. You ruin everything." That was the moment. The moment Naomi broke. But only for a second. Because then her phone buzzed. And everything changed. She reached into her bag with trembling hands and pulled out her phone. Pressed a number. The room watched, confused. Margaret turned away, the problem handled. The phone rang twice. Then a voice answered. "Ms. Ashford. What do you need?" Naomi's voice, when she spoke, was no longer shaking. It was steel. "David," she said clearly. "Cancel the Whitmore deal." Margaret froze. The room went silent. "Did you say cancel?" "Yes. The merger. All $11 billion. Void every contract. Effective immediately." "Understood." Naomi ended the call and looked up at Margaret Whitmore. "My name is Naomi Ashford," she said softly. "I'm the CEO of Zenith Global Industries, the company that was going to save you." She turned her wheelchair and rolled out, leaving an empire in ruins behind her. The ballroom shimmered like a fever dream. Naomi had re-entered. Not because she wanted to, but because Claudia had intercepted her in the hallway, tears streaming down her face, and begged her to stay just long enough to let the truth land. To let them see what they'd done. To let the world, because by now the videos were already spreading, witness the full scope of their cruelty and her power. "You don't owe them anything," Claudia had whispered. "But you owe yourself this moment." So Naomi had returned. And now she sat just inside the ballroom entrance, perfectly still, her hands resting calmly on the armrests of her wheelchair. Her midnight blue gown caught the light from the chandeliers above, making her look like she'd been carved from sapphire and steel. The room had gone from chaotic to silent in the span of 30 seconds. Every eye was on her. Margaret Whitmore stood frozen near the center of the room, her face drained of all color. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. Vanessa had stumbled backward into a table, knocking over a champagne flute. The sound of shattering crystal echoed through the silence like a gunshot. Elliot Whitmore stood near the stage, his hands gripping the back of a chair so tightly his knuckles had gone white. He looked like a man watching his entire world collapse in real time. And the guests, the wealthy, powerful, important guests, stood scattered throughout the ballroom like statues, their phones still raised, still recording, but now with expressions of dawning horror instead of amusement. Naomi let the silence stretch. Let it breathe. Let it suffocate them. Then she spoke. Her voice was soft, but it carried through the room like a bell tolling. "I came here tonight," she began, her gaze sweeping slowly across the crowd, "as a guest, as a business partner, as the CEO of the company your hosts were counting on to save them from bankruptcy." A few gasps rippled through the room. Margaret's hand flew to her throat. "I came here," Naomi continued, her voice steady but laced with something raw, "believing that in rooms like this, rooms full of educated, influential, powerful people, I might finally be seen as more than my disability, more than my race, more than an inconvenience." Her eyes found Vanessa, who had gone pale as a ghost. "But within minutes of arriving, I was called in it." Naomi's voice broke slightly on the word, and she paused, swallowing hard. "I was told I didn't belong. That I was ruining your evening. That people like me shouldn't be allowed out in public." Vanessa opened her mouth, whether to apologize or defend herself, no one would ever know, but Naomi held up a hand. "Don't," Naomi said quietly. "Don't insult me further by pretending you didn't mean it." Vanessa's mouth snapped shut. Naomi turned her gaze to Margaret. "And you," she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "you looked at me and saw a poor thing, someone to be pitted, managed, removed." She paused. "You didn't even ask my name." Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but Naomi didn't stop. "Do you know what that feels like?" Naomi asked, and now her voice was shaking. Not with weakness, but with 8 years of suppressed rage and pain finally breaking free. To work your entire life to build something extraordinary. To prove over and over and over again that you are capable, brilliant, worthy, and still be reduced to nothing the moment you enter a room. The silence was unbearable. Someone in the crowd let out a choked sob. Naomi's hands trembled on her armrests, but she forced herself to continue. I have spent 8 years in this chair, she said. 8 years rebuilding myself after an accident that should have killed me. 8 years learning to navigate a world that wasn't built for me. And in that time I built a company worth $40 billion. I created 30,000 jobs. I pioneered technology that's helping to save the planet. She paused, her eyes glistening. But tonight, none of that mattered. Because all you saw was the chair. Her voice cracked. All you saw was broken. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she didn't wipe it away. So yes, she said, her voice hardening again. I canceled your deal. All $11 billion of it. Because I will not reward cruelty with success. I will not teach the next generation that dignity is negotiable. And I will not pretend that what happened here tonight was anything other than what it was. She looked directly at Margaret. Dehumanization. The word hung in the air like smoke. Margaret crumpled into a nearby chair, her face buried in her hands. Vanessa looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. And Elliot took a single step forward, his face stricken. Ms. Ashford, he said, his voice hoarse. I don't, Naomi said, her tone sharp. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected. Shame. Deep, genuine shame. You stood there, she said quietly. You watched it happen. And you did nothing. Elliot flinched as if she'd struck him. That makes you complicit, Naomi continued. And complicity is just cowardice with better lighting. Elliot opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no defense. No excuse. Because she was right. Naomi turned her wheelchair slowly, preparing to leave for the final time. But then a voice rang out from the back of the room. Wait. Everyone turned. A woman stepped forward from the crowd. Older, black, elegant, with silver hair and kind eyes. She wore a deep purple gown and walked with the quiet authority of someone who'd spent a lifetime fighting battles most people couldn't imagine. Naomi recognized her immediately. Dr. Lorraine Bennett. Civil rights activist. Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient. A legend. Ms. Ashford, Dr. Bennett said, her voice gentle but firm. May I speak? Naomi hesitated, then nodded. Dr. Bennett moved through the silent crowd until she stood beside Naomi's wheelchair. Then, slowly, with great deliberation, she knelt. So she was eye level with Naomi. A murmur rippled through the room. I have spent 60 years fighting to be seen, Dr. Bennett said softly, her eyes locked on Naomi's. And I have watched young women like you fight that same battle, in different bodies, with different obstacles, but the same unbreakable spirit. She reached out and gently placed a hand over Naomi's. What they did to you tonight was unconscionable, and what you did in response was extraordinary. Naomi's throat tightened. You didn't just defend yourself, Dr. Bennett continued. You defended every person who's ever been made to feel invisible. Every person who's been told they don't belong. Every person who's been reduced to their body instead of celebrated for their mind. Tears streamed down Naomi's face now, unchecked. Dr. Bennett squeezed her hand. You are not broken, child. You are unbreakable. The words hit Naomi like a wave. She let out a sob, raw and guttural, and Dr. Bennett pulled her into an embrace. The room watched in absolute silence as these two women, separated by generation but united by struggle, held each other. And for the first time all night, Naomi felt seen. Not pitied. Not dismissed. Seen. When they finally pulled apart, Dr. Bennett stood and turned to address the crowd. "Shame on you," she said simply. "All of you." Her words were quiet, but they cut deeper than any shout could have. "You had a chance tonight to witness greatness," Dr. Bennett continued. "To learn from it. To celebrate it. And instead you chose cruelty." She looked at Margaret. "You chose prejudice." She looked at Vanessa. "You chose mockery." She turned back to Naomi. "But she chose grace." Dr. Bennett gestured to Naomi. "This woman could have destroyed you quietly, behind closed doors, in boardrooms where none of you would ever see it coming. But instead she gave you the gift of accountability. She held up a mirror and forced you to see yourselves." She paused. "What you do with that reflection is up to you." Then she extended her hand to Naomi. "Come. Let's leave this place. You've given them more than they deserve." Naomi took her hand and nodded. Together they moved toward the exit, Dr. Bennett walking slowly beside Naomi's wheelchair. As they passed, several guests stepped forward. A young black woman in a red gown reached out and touched Naomi's shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. An older man in a wheelchair himself met her eyes and nodded solemnly. "You spoke for all of us tonight." A woman with a visible prosthetic arm placed her hand over her heart. "You're my hero." Naomi's tears fell freely now, but she smiled through them. By the time she reached the exit, a small crowd had formed. People who'd been silent before but were finding their voices now. And as Naomi rolled out into the cool night air, she heard something she didn't expect. Applause. Slow at first. Then building. She turned back to look. At least 50 people were clapping. Some with tears in their eyes. Some with expressions of shame. But all of them acknowledging, finally, what should have been obvious from the start. She mattered. Inside the ballroom, Margaret Whitmore sat alone at a table, her head in her hands. Around her, the gala was disintegrating. Guests were leaving in droves. Photographers were packing up. Staff members whispered frantically into radios. Elliot appeared beside her, his face ashen. "Mother," he said quietly, "what have we done?" Margaret looked up at him, her carefully constructed mask finally shattered. "We've lost everything," she whispered. "No," Elliot said, his voice hard. "You lost everything. And you deserve to." Margaret stared at him in shock. "I'm done," Elliot continued. "I'm done pretending this family stands for anything other than cruelty and entitlement. I'm done being complicit." He turned and walked away, leaving his mother alone in the ruins of her empire. Vanessa stood in the powder room, staring at her phone. The video had already gone viral. Millions of views. Tens of thousands of comments. All of them condemning her. Disgusting. She should be ashamed. This is why we need to cancel rich people. Her hands shook as she read comment after comment, each one more vicious than the last. She tried to type a response, an apology, an explanation, something. But her fingers wouldn't work. Because deep down she knew. There was nothing she could say that would undo what she'd done. She had called a woman an it. She had said people like Naomi shouldn't be allowed in public. And the whole world had watched her do it. Vanessa sank to the floor, her designer gown pooling around her, and wept. Not because she was sorry, but because she'd been caught. Outside, Naomi sat in her van, Dr. Bennett beside her, Claudia in the driver's seat. Her phone was buzzing non-stop. News outlets. Investors. Colleagues. Friends. Everyone wanted a statement. But Naomi didn't have the energy. She just stared out the window at the Whitmore estate, at the lights glowing in the ballroom where her humiliation had been turned into her triumph. "You did good tonight," Dr. Bennett said softly. "I don't feel good," Naomi admitted. "I feel hollowed out." "That's because you gave them the truth," Dr. Bennett replied. "And the truth always costs something." Naomi nodded slowly. Then her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from an unknown number. "Ms. Ashford, this is Elliot Whitmore. I know I have no right to contact you, but I needed to say I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. You deserved better. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to be better because of what you showed me tonight." Naomi stared at the message for a long moment. Then she deleted it. Not out of anger, but because she didn't owe him forgiveness. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. She turned to Claudia. "Take me home." Claudia nodded, started the engine, and drove. And as the Whitmore estate disappeared into the distance, Naomi closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "I am not broken. I am unbreakable." Naomi stood her ground even when the world tried to make her disappear. Have you ever had to defend your humanity in a space that refused to see you? Or watched someone else do it? Tell me in the comments. What did that moment teach you about strength? Naomi didn't sleep. She tried. She'd returned to her suite at the Meridian just before midnight, exhausted in a way that went bone deep. Claudia had helped her through her night routine, transferring from her wheelchair to bed, arranging pillows, making sure her phone and water were within reach. "You need rest," Claudia had said gently. "Your body's been through hell tonight." Naomi had nodded, closed her eyes, and listened as Claudia quietly left the room. But sleep never came. Instead, she lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the evening in excruciating detail. Who let the cripple in? People like you ruin everything. Poor thing probably wandered away from a group home. The words circled her mind like vultures. She reached for her phone on the nightstand, 3:47 a.m., and made the mistake of opening social media. The video was everywhere. #WheelchairCEO. #Naomi Ashford. #Whitmore disgrace. Millions of views across every platform. Think pieces were already being written. News segments recorded. Opinion columns drafted. Some of the comments made her chest tight with gratitude. She's a queen. Absolute queen. This is what power looks like. I'm disabled and I've never felt more seen. Thank you, Naomi. But others cut just as deep as Vanessa's words had. She overreacted. It was just a misunderstanding. Canceling an $11 billion deal over hurt feelings? That's not professional, that's petty. I mean, she was blocking the entrance. Maybe there's more to the story. Playing the victim and the race card? Typical. Naomi's hands trembled as she scrolled. Even in her vindication, even in her power, there were people who refused to see her as anything other than the problem. She locked her phone and set it face down on the nightstand. Then she did something she hadn't done in years. She cried herself to sleep. Across town, in the now quiet Whitmore estate, Margaret sat alone in the library. The gala had ended in disaster. Guests had fled. The caterers had packed up in record time. The press, oh God, the press, had swarmed like locusts, shouting questions, demanding statements, capturing every moment of the Whitmore family's public execution. Margaret had locked herself in the library hours ago. The room was dark except for a single lamp beside her chair. Shadows pooled in the corners. The portrait of her late husband, Charles, loomed above the fireplace, his painted eyes seeming to judge her from beyond the grave. "I tried," Margaret whispered to the portrait. "I tried to save us." But even as she said the words, she knew they were a lie. She hadn't tried to save anything. She'd tried to control everything. And in doing so, she'd destroyed it all. Her phone sat on the side table, silent now after hours of non-stop buzzing. She'd turned off the ringer after the 50th call from reporters, lawyers, board members, distant relatives suddenly concerned about the family's reputation. But she'd read the messages. All of them. The board of Whitmore Global had called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. The merger cancellation had triggered a cascade of financial consequences. Loans being called in, investors pulling out, stock prices plummeting. By the end of the week, the company would likely be insolvent. The estate would be seized. The Whitmore name would be synonymous with bigotry and collapse. Margaret reached for the glass of brandy she'd poured an hour ago and took a long sip. It burned going down, but she welcomed the pain. She deserved it. Didn't she? No, a small voice whispered in the back of her mind. You deserve worse. A soft knock at the door startled her. Mother. Elliot's voice. Gentle. Hesitant. Go away, Margaret said. The door opened anyway. Elliot stepped inside, still wearing his tuxedo from the gala, though his tie was gone and his shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the span of a single night. I said go away, Margaret repeated, not looking at him. I know. Elliot closed the door behind him and moved to the chair across from hers. He sat without asking permission. But I'm not leaving. Margaret finally looked at him, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. What do you want, Elliot? An apology. Absolution. Her voice was bitter. I have neither to give. I don't want an apology, Elliot said quietly. I want to understand. Understand what? How you could do that. His voice cracked slightly. How you could look at that woman, a guest, a CEO, a human being, and treat her like she was nothing. Margaret's jaw tightened. I didn't. You did, Elliot interrupted, his tone firm. You absolutely did. And so did Vanessa. And so did every person in that room who laughed or filmed or just stood by and watched. He paused. Including me. Margaret looked away. Elliot leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. I've spent my whole life making excuses for this family. For you. Telling myself that the casual racism, the classism, the cruelty, it was just the way things were. That it didn't really matter because we did charity work and donated to the right causes and said the right things in public. Elliot. But tonight I realized something, he continued, his voice thick with emotion. It does matter. It's all that matters. Because you can donate $1 million to a foundation for disabled children and still call a disabled woman an at the moment she inconveniences you. Margaret flinched. You can claim to support equality and still treat a black woman like she's less than human the second she enters your space. Elliot's eyes filled with tears. And I stood there and let it happen. I watched you and Vanessa destroy that woman, and I did nothing. What were you supposed to do? Margaret snapped, her composure finally cracking. Make a scene. Humiliate your own family in front of 300 people. Yes. Elliot shouted, standing abruptly. Yes, Mother. That's exactly what I should have done. I should have stopped Vanessa the second she opened her mouth. I should have intervened when you started talking to Ms. Ashford like she was a child. I should have. His voice broke. I should have been better. The silence that followed was suffocating. Margaret stared at her son, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time in years. He wasn't the passive, bookish boy she'd always dismissed. He was a man who'd finally found his spine. It's too late, Margaret said finally, her voice barely a whisper. The damage is done. You're right, Elliot agreed. The damage is done. But that doesn't mean we can't try to make amends. Amends? Margaret laughed bitterly. Elliot, she canceled an $11 billion deal with a single phone call. Our company is finished. This estate will be sold. The Whitmore name is ruined. What possible amends could we make? Elliot met her eyes. We could start by telling the truth. In the west wing of the estate, Vanessa sat on the edge of her bed, scrolling through her phone with shaking hands. The comments were relentless. Brutal. Deserved. She'd tried to post an apology, a carefully worded statement her publicist had drafted, but it had been torn apart within minutes. Too little, too late. She's only sorry she got caught. This isn't an apology. It's damage control. Vanessa deleted the post. Then she deleted Instagram. Then Twitter. Then TikTok. But it didn't matter. The internet never forgot. A soft knock at the door made her jump. Van. Elliot's voice. She didn't answer. The door opened anyway, and Elliot stepped inside. He looked exhausted. Destroyed. Good. She wasn't the only one suffering. What do you want? Vanessa asked, her voice flat. I want to know why you did it, Elliot said simply. Vanessa laughed. A hollow, bitter sound. Did what? Call her an it. Mock her. Push her wheelchair like she was a shopping cart. She turned to face him, her eyes blazing. Which part would you like me to explain? Elliot closed the door and leaned against it. All of it. Vanessa stood and began pacing. You want to know why? Because she didn't belong there, Elliot. She didn't fit. She made the whole event feel awkward, uncomfortable. She gestured wildly. And yes, I know how that sounds. I know I'm the villain now. But I was just saying what everyone else was thinking. No, Elliot said quietly. You were saying what you were thinking. And you were wrong. Vanessa spun to face him. Don't you dare. You were wrong, Vanessa. His voice was firm. That woman is one of the most powerful CEOs in the world. She built a $40 billion company. She's brilliant, accomplished, and exactly the kind of person who should be at events like that. He paused. The only reason you didn't see it is because you didn't want to. Vanessa's face flushed. So now you're taking her side. I'm taking the side of basic human decency, Elliot shot back. Something you clearly abandoned the moment it became inconvenient. Vanessa's eyes filled with angry tears. You don't understand what it's like. What's like? Elliot interrupted. Being held accountable for your actions? Being called out for cruelty? Yeah, Vanessa, that must be so hard for you. She glared at him. I want a divorce. Elliot blinked, taken aback. What? You heard me. Vanessa crossed her arms. I'm done. I married into this family for the prestige, the lifestyle, the name. And now all of that's gone. So what's the point? Elliot stared at her for a long moment. Then he started laughing. Not cruelly, but with genuine, exhausted relief. Thank God, he said. I'll have my lawyer send over the papers tomorrow. Vanessa's mouth fell open. You what? I should have left years ago, Elliot said, his laughter fading into something sadder. But I was too afraid. Too comfortable. Too complicit. He looked at her. But tonight I realized something. I don't want to be married to someone who thinks cruelty is a personality trait. He turned and opened the door. Goodbye, Vanessa. And then he was gone. Vanessa stood alone in the bedroom, staring at the empty doorway. And for the first time in her life, she felt truly, utterly alone. Back at the Meridian, Naomi woke to soft sunlight streaming through the windows. She blinked, disoriented, then checked her phone. 11:23 a.m. She'd slept for almost 8 hours. A miracle. Her body ached, her back, her shoulders, the phantom pains that never really went away. But there was something else, too. A lightness. Not happiness exactly, but a sense of release. She transferred into her wheelchair and made her way to the living room, where Claudia sat at the dining table with her laptop, surrounded by newspapers and printouts. "Morning," Claudia said, looking up. "Or, well, late morning. How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck," Naomi admitted. "But also, okay. I think." Claudia smiled. "Good. Because you're about to be very busy." She slid a folder across the table. Naomi opened it. Inside were interview requests from 60 Minutes, The New York Times, Oprah, The View, every major media outlet in the country. "They all want to hear your story," Claudia said. "In your own words." Naomi stared at the list. "That's a lot." "You don't have to do any of it," Claudia said quickly. "You don't owe anyone anything. But if you want to speak, the world is ready to listen." Naomi closed the folder. "I need time," she said. "To think. To process." "Of course." Claudia nodded. "Take all the time you need." Naomi's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Ms. Ashford, this is Elliot Whitmore. I know I have no right to contact you, but my mother and I would like to make a public statement taking full responsibility for what happened. We won't do it without your permission. You've been through enough. Please let me know if this is acceptable. Elliot." Naomi read the message twice. Then she showed it to Claudia. "What do you think?" Naomi asked. Claudia frowned. "I think he's trying to control the narrative. Make himself look better." "Maybe," Naomi said. "Or maybe he's actually trying to do the right thing." "Does it matter?" Naomi considered. "I think it does. Because if they take responsibility publicly, it sets a precedent. It shows that actions have consequences, but also that people can choose accountability over denial." Claudia studied her. "You're really considering this?" "I don't know yet." Naomi set her phone down. "But I'm not going to dismiss it out of hand." She looked out the window at the ocean beyond. "I spent last night being told I was broken," Naomi said quietly. "But I'm not. And maybe they're not beyond repair either." Claudia reached over and squeezed her hand. "Whatever you decide," she said, "I'm with you." Naomi smiled. "I know." By evening, the Whitmore estate had become a media circus. News vans lined the driveway. Reporters camped outside the gates. Helicopters circled overhead. Inside, Margaret sat in the drawing room with Elliot and a team of crisis management consultants. "The statement needs to be clear," one consultant said. "Full accountability. No excuses. No deflection. And it needs to come from both of you," another added, looking at Margaret and Elliot. "Jointly. Mother and son. Family taking responsibility." Margaret's hands trembled in her lap. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered. Elliot placed a hand on her shoulder. "You have to, Mother." "We both do." Margaret looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "What if it's not enough?" "It won't be," Elliot said honestly. "But it's a start." Margaret closed her eyes and nodded. The press conference was scheduled for 2 p.m. the following day. Naomi hadn't agreed to attend. She hadn't even responded to Elliot's text. But she watched. From her suite at the Meridian, with Claudia sitting beside her and a cup of chamomile tea cooling on the side table, Naomi watched the live stream on her laptop as Margaret and Elliot Whitmore stepped up to a podium set up in front of the estate. The scene was stark. No elaborate backdrop. No carefully curated staging. Just two people standing before a wall of microphones and cameras, looking small and defeated. Margaret wore a simple black dress, no jewelry, no designer labels visible. Her hair was pulled back in a plain bun. She looked older than she had 2 nights ago. Worn. Elliot stood beside her in a dark suit, his expression solemn. They looked like they were attending a funeral. In a way, they were. Margaret stepped to the microphone first. Her hands gripped the edges of the podium so tightly her knuckles went white. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice shaking. "My name is Margaret Whitmore, and I am here today to take full responsibility for the events that occurred at our charity gala 2 nights ago." She paused, visibly struggling to continue. I looked at Naomi Ashford, a brilliant, accomplished woman, a guest at my event, and I did not see her humanity. I saw only her disability, and I treated her accordingly. Her voice cracked. I spoke to her as if she were a child. I assumed she was lost, confused, incapable. I called her a poor thing. I suggested she had wandered away from a group home. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. And in doing so, I dehumanized her. I reduced an extraordinary human being to a stereotype born from my own ignorance, prejudice, and fear. She took a shaky breath. There is no excuse for what I did. None. I cannot claim ignorance as a defense. I am 72 years old, and I have had a lifetime to learn better. I cannot claim it was a misunderstanding. My words and actions were clear. And I cannot claim I have changed, because change requires action, and I have only just begun that work. A reporter shouted a question, but Margaret held up a hand. "Please," she said. "Let me finish." The crowd quieted. "I have spent my entire life in rooms built for people like me," Margaret continued. "Rooms where wealth and whiteness and able-bodied privilege were the price of admission. And I never questioned it. I never thought about who was being kept out, or why, or what it cost them." She looked directly into the camera. Naomi Ashford forced me to see what I had spent a lifetime refusing to acknowledge. That the world I built my life in was never meant to include people like her. And instead of welcoming her, instead of celebrating her presence, I tried to remove her. Margaret's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I am ashamed. Deeply, profoundly ashamed. And I am sorry." She stepped back from the podium, tears streaming down her face. Elliot stepped forward. Elliot's hands shook as he gripped the microphone. "My name is Elliot Whitmore," he said, his voice steadier than his mother's but heavy with emotion. "And I want to be very clear about something. I am not here to defend my family. I am here to condemn our actions, including my own." He took a breath. 2 nights ago, I stood in that ballroom and watched as my wife and my mother humiliated Naomi Ashford. I heard the words they said. I saw the way they treated her. And I did nothing. His voice hardened. I told myself I was staying neutral. That it wasn't my place to intervene. That it would only make things worse. He shook his head. But neutrality in the face of cruelty is just cowardice with a better PR spin. A few murmurs rippled through the press corps. "I was complicit," Elliot continued. "And complicity is a choice. I chose to protect my comfort over another person's dignity. I chose silence over solidarity. And I will have to live with that choice for the rest of my life." He paused, his jaw tight. "But I'm done being complicit. I'm done protecting a legacy built on exclusion and arrogance. And I'm done pretending that my family's name means anything if it doesn't stand for basic human decency." He looked directly into the camera, as his mother had done. "Ms. Ashford, if you're watching this, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know that an apology doesn't undo the harm we caused. But I want you to know that you changed my life. You showed me what courage looks like, what integrity looks like, what power looks like." His voice broke slightly. "And I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the lesson you taught me." He stepped back. The press erupted in shouted questions. Margaret and Elliot stood together, not answering, just absorbing the weight of what they'd confessed. Then, without a word, they turned and walked back into the estate. The cameras followed them until the door closed. Naomi sat in silence, staring at the frozen image on her laptop screen. Claudia waited, saying nothing. Finally, Naomi spoke. "They meant it." "You think so?" Claudia asked cautiously. "I don't know if it matters whether they meant it," Naomi said slowly. "But I think they're trying. And maybe that's enough. For now." Her phone buzzed. Another text from Elliot. "I know the press conference doesn't fix anything. But I needed to say those things publicly. Not for optics. For accountability. You didn't ask for this, and you don't owe me anything. But if you're willing to meet, just once, I'd like to listen. Not explain. Not defend. Just listen. Elliot." Naomi read the message 3 times. Then she handed the phone to Claudia. "What do you think?" Claudia read it, her expression skeptical. "I think he's asking for something he doesn't deserve." "Probably," Naomi agreed. "But," Claudia prompted. "But," Naomi sighed. "I keep thinking about what Dr. Bennett said. About accountability. About mirrors." She looked at Claudia. "What if refusing to meet with him isn't protecting myself? It's just avoiding the discomfort of seeing if people can actually change." "Or," Claudia countered, "what if meeting with him puts you in a position where you have to do emotional labor for someone who caused you harm?" "That's a fair point," Naomi admitted. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Naomi said, "Set it up. But on my terms. Neutral location. You're there. And he gets 30 minutes. That's it." Claudia studied her. "You sure?" "No," Naomi said. "But I'm doing it anyway." 2 days later, Naomi sat in a private conference room at a boutique hotel in Manhattan. The room was small, elegant, and sterile. No history, no baggage. Just a table, 4 chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Claudia sat beside Naomi, tablet in hand, her expression neutral but alert. Across from them sat Elliot Whitmore. He looked different than he had at the gala. Smaller somehow. He wore jeans and a simple button-down shirt. No tie, no designer labels. His hair was slightly unkempt, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. Which Naomi suspected he hadn't. "Thank you for meeting me," Elliot said quietly. "I know you didn't have to." "You have 30 minutes, Naomi replied, her tone neutral. "Starting now." Elliot nodded. "I won't waste them." He took a breath. "I've spent the last few days reading everything I can find about ableism. About the history of disability rights. About the Americans with Disabilities Act and how it came to be. About the fight people like you have had to wage just to exist in spaces that should have been accessible from the start." Naomi said nothing, just watched him. "And the more I read," Elliot continued, "the more I realized how little I knew. How much I'd taken for granted. How many times in my life I've walked into buildings with stairs and never once thought about who couldn't follow me. How many times I've used words like crazy or lame without thinking about what they actually mean." He looked down at his hands. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me," he said. "I'm telling you because I need you to know that I'm listening. Really listening. For the first time in my life. Naomi leaned back slightly in her wheelchair. Why? Elliot looked up. Why what? Why now? Naomi asked, her voice soft but pointed. You've had 43 years to educate yourself. Why does it take public humiliation and financial ruin for you to suddenly care? Elliot flinched but didn't look away. Because I'm a coward, he said simply. I was comfortable. Complicit. And I told myself that as long as I wasn't actively being cruel, I was one of the good ones. He shook his head. But watching what my family did to you, and knowing I did nothing to stop it, it broke something in me. Good, Naomi said, her tone sharp. It should have. Elliot nodded. You're right. And I'm not here to ask for your forgiveness or your absolution. I'm here because I wanted to sit across from you, look you in the eye, and hear whatever you need to say to me. Naomi studied him for a long moment. Then she spoke. Do you know what the worst part was? Elliot shook his head. It wasn't the words, Naomi said quietly. It wasn't even being pushed or dismissed or filmed. It was the moment when your wife grabbed my wheelchair without asking. Her voice trembled slightly. When she just moved me. Like I was furniture. Like my body wasn't my own. Elliot's face crumpled. In that moment, Naomi continued, I felt 8 years old again. Right after my accident. Lying in a hospital bed while nurses and doctors moved me, positioned me, talked about me like I wasn't even there. Tears welled in her eyes. I have spent 8 years rebuilding my sense of autonomy, my sense of control over my own body. And she took that away in 3 seconds. I'm so sorry, Elliot whispered. Don't apologize to me, Naomi said, her voice hardening. Apologize to every disabled person you've ever ignored or pitted or othered. Apologize to every person who's had to fight for a ramp, for a job, for basic dignity because people like you couldn't be bothered to care. Elliot nodded, tears streaming down his face now. You're right. I will. Silence settled over the room. Then Naomi said, Vanessa. Where is she? Elliot wiped his eyes. We're getting divorced. She filed yesterday. Did you ask her to meet with me? I did, Elliot said. She refused. Why? Because she's not sorry, Elliot admitted. She's angry that she got caught. Angry that her reputation is ruined. But she's not sorry for what she did to you. Naomi absorbed this. And your mother? She wants to meet with you, Elliot said. Desperately. But I told her it had to be your choice. That she couldn't force her way into your space again. Smart, Naomi said dryly. Elliot managed a weak smile. I'm learning. Claudia, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. Mr. Whitmore, what exactly are you hoping to get out of this conversation? Elliot turned to her. Nothing. I'm not hoping to get anything. I'm hoping to give something, even if it's just the space for Ms. Ashford to tell me exactly what my family did to her without worrying about being polite or professional or forgiving. Claudia studied him, then nodded slightly. Naomi took a breath. The Serenity Fund. Elliot blinked. I'm sorry. The $11 billion I pulled from your deal, Naomi clarified. I'm redirecting it into a fund dedicated to supporting disabled entrepreneurs, people of color, and anyone who's been shut out of spaces like the one your family tried to shut me out of. Elliot's eyes widened. That's incredible. I want you to be part of it, Naomi said. Elliot froze. What? Not as a figurehead, Naomi clarified quickly. Not for optics. But as someone who works. Really works. Listening to the people we're serving. Learning from them. Using whatever connections you have left to open doors. I Elliot seemed genuinely stunned. Why would you want me involved? Because accountability isn't just about saying you're sorry, Naomi said. It's about doing the work to make sure it doesn't happen again. And I think you're serious about that work. But I need to see it. Elliot nodded slowly. I'll do it. Whatever you need. It won't be easy, Naomi warned. You'll be working with people who have every reason to hate you, who will question your motives, who won't trust you. I understand. And you won't get credit, Naomi added. This isn't about your redemption arc. It's about the people we're helping. I know, Elliot said. And I'm okay with that. Naomi held his gaze for a long moment. Then she extended her hand. Elliot stared at it, then carefully, gently shook it. Don't make me regret this, Naomi said. I won't, Elliot promised. I swear. After Elliot left, Claudia turned to Naomi. That was either incredibly generous or incredibly risky. Naomi smiled faintly. Maybe both. Why did you do it? Naomi looked out the window at the city below. Because Dr. Bennett was right. I can hold up the mirror. But what they do with their reflection is up to them. She paused. And if Elliot actually does the work, if he actually changes, then maybe other people will see that it's possible. That you don't have to stay who you were. Claudia reached over and squeezed her hand. You're a better person than I am. I'm just tired of being angry, Naomi admitted. And I want to see if grace can be as powerful as rage. That evening, Margaret Whitmore received a message. It came through Elliot, who'd stopped by the estate on his way home. She'll meet with you, he said. But only if you're ready to really hear her. Not defend yourself. Not explain. Just listen. Margaret's hands trembled. When? Next week. I'll send you the details. Margaret nodded, tears already forming. Thank you. Don't thank me, Elliot said. Thank her. She's giving you something you don't deserve. He turned to leave. Elliot. He stopped. I'm proud of you, Margaret said softly. Elliot looked back at her, his expression sad. I wish that were enough, he said. And then he left. 1 week later, Naomi sat in the same conference room, waiting. This time, Claudia wasn't beside her. Naomi had asked to meet Margaret alone. Not because she trusted her, but because some conversations required vulnerability that couldn't exist with witnesses. The door opened, and Margaret Whitmore stepped inside. She looked even smaller than she had at the press conference. She wore a navy cardigan over a simple white blouse and dark slacks, the kind of outfit Naomi's mother might have worn to church. No pearls. No diamonds. No armor. Just a woman carrying the weight of her own shame. Ms. Ashford, Margaret said softly, stopping just inside the doorway. Thank you for agreeing to see me. Naomi gestured to the chair across from her. Sit. Margaret sat, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her posture rigid with tension. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Naomi said, Why did you do it? Margaret looked up, confused. I'm sorry. Why did you treat me the way you did? Naomi clarified. I need to understand. Was it just racism? Ableism? Or something deeper? Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. All of it, she whispered. And worse. Naomi waited. Margaret took a shaky breath. When I saw you in that ballroom, She stopped, struggling. I saw everything I'd been taught to fear. Fear. Naomi's voice was sharp. You were afraid of me? Not you specifically, Margaret said quickly. But what you represented. Change. A world I don't understand. A world where people like me are no longer at the center. She paused. A world where I'm irrelevant. Naomi leaned back slightly, studying her. Go on. Margaret's hands trembled in her lap. I was raised to believe that there was a natural order to things, that certain people belonged in certain places, and that as long as everyone stayed where they belonged, the world made sense. Her voice dropped. But you didn't fit into my order. You were black, disabled, and more powerful than I could ever hope to be. And instead of celebrating that, instead of learning from it, I tried to put you back in the box I'd created for people like you. Which was? Naomi asked coldly. Beneath me, Margaret whispered, shame thick in her voice. I'm so sorry. Naomi said nothing for a long moment. Then she asked, have you ever been made to feel small? Margaret blinked, surprised by the question. I don't understand. Have you ever walked into a room and had people look right through you? Naomi pressed. Have you ever been touched without permission? Talked down to? Treated like your existence was an inconvenience? Margaret opened her mouth, then closed it. No, I haven't. Then you have no idea what you did to me, Naomi said quietly. No idea what it costs to walk or roll into spaces that were never built for you. To smile and be polite and professional while people debate your humanity like it's a matter of opinion. Margaret's tears fell freely now. You're right. I don't know. And I'm so sorry. Stop apologizing, Naomi said, her voice hard. Apologies are easy. I want you to understand. Margaret nodded, wiping her eyes. Then help me understand. Please. Naomi took a breath. And then, for the first time, she told her story. I was 23 when it happened. Naomi began. Her voice was soft, distant, as if she were reaching back through time. I'd just finished my master's at MIT. Top of my class. I had 3 job offers from major tech firms. The world felt open. Possible. She paused. I was driving home from a celebration dinner with friends. It was late. I was tired but happy. Margaret sat perfectly still, listening. A drunk driver ran a red light, Naomi continued, her voice flattening. Hit me head on. My car flipped twice. I don't remember the impact. I don't remember the ambulance. I just remember waking up in the ICU 3 days later and not being able to feel my legs. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. The doctors told me I'd severed my spinal cord, Naomi said. That I'd never walk again. That my life as I knew it was over. Her eyes grew distant. And for a while I believed them. How long? Margaret asked softly. 6 months. Naomi replied. 6 months of lying in a hospital bed, then a rehab facility, learning how to do everything all over again. How to transfer. How to dress myself. How to exist in a world that suddenly felt hostile and inaccessible. She looked directly at Margaret. Do you know what people said to me during that time? Margaret shook her head. They said I was brave, Naomi said, her voice laced with bitterness. They said I was inspiring, that I was so strong for surviving. She paused. But no one asked me how I felt. No one asked if I was angry or scared or grieving the life I'd lost. They just needed me to be their inspiration porn so they could feel better about their own lives. Margaret flinched at the term but said nothing. And when I finally got out of rehab, Naomi continued, when I started trying to rebuild my life, I realized that the world wasn't built for me. Not anymore. Buildings with stairs and no ramps. Job interviews where hiring managers looked at my wheelchair before they looked at my resume. Dates where men told me I was beautiful for someone in a wheelchair. Her voice cracked. I was erased, she whispered. Not all at once, but piece by piece, until I had to fight just to be seen as human. Margaret was crying openly now, but Naomi didn't stop. So I built Zenith, Naomi said, her voice strengthening. I built it because I was angry, because I refused to let the world tell me what I was capable of, because I needed to prove to myself, to everyone, that I was more than my disability. She leaned forward. And I did it. I built a $40 billion company. I changed industries. I employed tens of thousands of people. I became everything they said I couldn't be. She paused. And then I walked into your ballroom. And you looked at me and saw nothing. The silence that followed was suffocating. Margaret buried her face in her hands and sobbed, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. I'm so sorry, she gasped between sobs. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. You should have, Naomi said sharply. You didn't need to know my story to treat me like a person. That should have been the default. Margaret nodded, unable to speak. Naomi watched her for a moment, then said more gently, But you didn't know. Because you've never had to. Margaret looked up, her face red and blotchy. What do you mean? You've lived your entire life insulated, Naomi said, protected by wealth and whiteness and able-bodied privilege. You've never had to think about accessibility because every space was built for you. You've never had to think about race because yours has always been the default. You've never had to fight to be seen because you've always been visible. Margaret shook her head. That's not. I've had struggles, Ms. Ashford. I've faced challenges. I'm sure you have, Naomi interrupted. But were any of those challenges about whether you deserved to exist in public? Whether you were human enough to be treated with basic dignity? Margaret went silent. That's the difference, Naomi said quietly. Your struggles were real, but they weren't existential. Margaret sat with that truth for a long time. Finally she spoke. My husband, Charles, he had a stroke 7 years ago. Naomi's expression shifted slightly. I didn't know. No one did, Margaret said. We kept it private. He was diminished, physically and mentally. He needed help eating, dressing, using the bathroom. Her voice wavered. And I was so ashamed. Naomi's eyes narrowed. Ashamed of what? Of him, Margaret whispered. Of what he'd become. Of having to care for him. Of watching this powerful, dignified man reduced to. She trailed off. To someone who needed help, Naomi finished coldly. Margaret nodded, fresh tears streaming down her face. I hired nurses. Private care. I made sure he was comfortable. But I couldn't look at him. I couldn't bear to see him that way. Because he reminded you that you're mortal, Naomi said. That you could become him. Yes, Margaret admitted. And when he died, I felt relieved. She looked at Naomi, her expression raw. What kind of person does that make me? Human, Naomi said simply. A flawed one. But human. Margaret seemed taken aback. But here's the thing, Naomi continued. You took that fear, that discomfort with disability, and you weaponized it. Against me. Against everyone like me. I know, Margaret whispered. Do you? Naomi challenged. Because it's not just about that night. It's about a lifetime of small cruelties. Of buildings without ramps. Of hiring managers who pass over qualified candidates because they use wheelchairs. Of people like you who decide, consciously or unconsciously, that some bodies are worth more than others. Margaret's shoulders shook. How do I fix it? You can't, Naomi said bluntly. You can't undo the harm. But you can do better going forward. How? Naomi leaned back in her wheelchair. You listen. You learn. You use whatever privilege and resources you have left to make the world more accessible. Not just physically, but culturally. You amplify disabled voices instead of speaking over them. You check your discomfort and do the work anyway. She paused. And you accept that you will mess up. That you'll say the wrong thing or make assumptions or accidentally hurt people. But you don't use that as an excuse to stop trying. Margaret nodded slowly, absorbing every word. Can I ask you something? Margaret said after a moment. Go ahead. Why did you agree to meet with me? Margaret asked. After everything I did, why give me this chance? Naomi considered the question. Because someone gave me a chance once, she said finally. When I was in rehab, drowning in anger and grief, a woman, another patient, a black woman who'd been paralyzed for 20 years, she sat with me one night and said, You can be angry. You should be angry. But don't let that anger consume you. Use it. Build with it. Naomi's eyes glistened. Her name was June, she continued. And she changed my life. Not by making excuses for the world's ableism, but by showing me that I could survive it. Thrive in spite of it. She looked at Margaret. She died 3 years ago. And before she did, she told me, when you get the chance, be someone's June. Naomi's voice softened. So that's what I'm doing. I'm giving you the chance June gave me. Margaret's face crumpled. I don't deserve it. Probably not, Naomi agreed. But June didn't give me that chance because I deserved it. She gave it to me because she believed people could change. And I'm choosing to believe the same about you. Margaret reached across the table. Slowly, carefully, asking with her eyes for permission. Naomi hesitated. Then she extended her hand. Margaret took it gently, holding it like something precious and fragile. Thank you, Margaret whispered. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of this. Don't do it for me, Naomi said. Do it for the next person who rolls into a room and needs to be seen. Margaret nodded, squeezing Naomi's hand once before letting go. When Margaret left the conference room an hour later, Claudia was waiting in the hallway. How did it go? Claudia asked. Naomi was quiet for a moment. I think, she said slowly, she might actually change. You believe her. I believe she wants to, Naomi said. Whether she does the work is up to her. Claudia studied her friend. You okay? Naomi smiled faintly. Yeah, I think I am. That night, Margaret sat in her small Brooklyn apartment, the one she'd moved into after selling the estate, and opened her laptop. She typed a single sentence into the search bar. How to be a disability rights ally. And then she started reading. And Naomi, back at the Meridian, opened her journal and wrote, Today I chose grace over rage. I don't know if it will matter. I don't know if she'll change. But I know that I can't carry the weight of their transformation. I can only carry my own truth. And today my truth is that I am still here. Still whole. Still unbreakable. She closed the journal. And for the first time in weeks, she slept peacefully. 3 months later, the offices of Zenith Global Industries gleamed in the afternoon sun, the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 47th floor offering a panoramic view of Manhattan that never got old. Naomi sat at her desk, a custom-designed workstation that accommodated her wheelchair perfectly, reviewing grant applications for the newly launched Serenity Fund. The fund had gone live 6 weeks ago. The response had been overwhelming. Over 15,000 applications from disabled entrepreneurs, women of color, mothers, veterans, people who'd been told their whole lives that their dreams were too big, too risky, too impossible. Naomi had assembled a team to review them. People who understood struggle not from research, but from lived experience. Former social workers, community organizers, disabled activists, formerly incarcerated individuals rebuilding their lives. And, surprisingly, Elliot Whitmore. He'd joined the team as promised, working quietly in the background. No press releases. No publicity. Just labor. He reviewed applications, conducted interviews, attended community meetings in the Bronx, in Harlem, in neighborhoods where the Whitmore name had once been synonymous with exploitation. And he listened. Really listened. Naomi had watched him carefully over the past 3 months, waiting for the performance to crack, waiting for him to get tired of the work, frustrated by the lack of recognition, resentful of the people who still didn't trust him. But it hadn't happened. If anything, he'd grown more committed. A soft knock at her office door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in," Naomi called. The door opened, and Elliot stepped inside, carrying a folder and looking both hopeful and hesitant. "Hey," he said. "Do you have a minute?" Naomi gestured to the chair across from her desk. "What's up?" Elliot sat and opened the folder. "I wanted to run something by you. There's an applicant, a woman named Simone Crawford, who's trying to start an adaptive clothing line, specifically designed for wheelchair users, people with limited mobility, chronic pain conditions." He slid the application across to Naomi. "Her designs are incredible," Elliot continued. "Functional but beautiful. Magnetic closures instead of buttons. Seated fit pants. Stylish but accessible. She's got prototypes, a business plan, partnerships lined up with disabled models, everything." Naomi scanned the application, her interest peaking. "What's the ask?" $50,000 to cover manufacturing costs for the first production run and a pop-up shop in Brooklyn. Elliot paused. "But here's the thing, she's been rejected by 12 other investors. All of them said the market was too niche." Naomi's jaw tightened. "Of course they did. I think we should fund her," Elliot said. "Not just because the idea is good, which it is, but because she's exactly who this fund was created for." Naomi looked up at him, studying his expression. There was no performance here. No calculated angle. Just genuine enthusiasm for someone else's dream. "I agree," Naomi said. "Let's approve it." Elliot's face lit up. "Really? Really?" Naomi smiled. "Good eye, Elliot." He ducked his head, almost bashful. "Thanks. I'm trying." "I can see that." There was a moment of comfortable silence. Then Elliot said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you let me be part of this?" he asked. "I've been wondering for months. You could have cut me out completely, and no one would have blamed you." Naomi set down the application and leaned back in her wheelchair. "Do you remember what you said at the press conference? About complicity being cowardice?" Elliot nodded. "I believed you," Naomi said. "Not because I trusted you, I didn't. But because I saw something in your eyes that I recognized." "What?" "Shame," Naomi said simply. "Real shame. Not performative guilt. Not damage control. The kind of shame that breaks you open." Elliot looked down. "It did." "I know." Naomi's voice softened. "And I've learned that shame can do one of two things. It can destroy you, make you retreat, make you defensive. Or it can transform you, make you humble, make you listen." She paused. "You chose transformation. And that's rare." Elliot's eyes glistened. "I don't feel transformed. I feel like I'm constantly messing up, saying the wrong thing, not understanding fast enough." "That's what growth looks like," Naomi said. "It's uncomfortable. It's humbling. It's supposed to be." Does it get easier? Naomi laughed softly. No, but you get better at sitting with the discomfort. Elliot smiled despite himself. That's encouraging. Good, Naomi said. Because I'm about to make you more uncomfortable. Elliot's smile faded. How? I want you to come with me tomorrow, Naomi said, to a community meeting in East New York. We're partnering with a local organization that supports disabled youth, and they want to hear directly from the fund's leadership about our priorities. Elliot shifted nervously. They're going to hate me. Probably, Naomi agreed. At first. Then why? Because you need to hear from the people we're serving, Naomi interrupted. Not through applications or reports. Face to face. You need to see their lives, their challenges, their brilliance. And you need to earn their trust, not assume you deserve it. Elliot took a breath. Okay. I'll be there. Good. Naomi's expression softened. And Elliot? Yeah. You're doing better than you think. He looked at her surprised. You really believe that? I wouldn't say it if I didn't. Elliot nodded slowly, visibly moved. Thank you. That means more than you know. The next evening, Naomi and Elliot arrived at a community center in East New York. The building was old but well-maintained, the walls covered in murals painted by local kids. Inside, about 30 people filled a small meeting room. Teenagers and young adults, most of them disabled, all of them black or brown. They looked at Elliot with open suspicion. Naomi introduced herself first, and the energy in the room shifted immediately. Faces lit up. A few people clapped. Most of you know who I am, Naomi said with a smile. But for those who don't, I'm Naomi Ashford, CEO of Zenith Global, and the person funding the Serenity Fund. Applause. And this, Naomi gestured to Elliot, is Elliot Whitmore. He's part of our team. The applause stopped. A young woman in the front row, 19, maybe 20, with box braids and a prosthetic leg visible beneath her ripped jeans, spoke up. Wait. Whitmore. Like Whitmore Global. The family that tried to kick you out of that gala. Elliot's face flushed, but he didn't look away. Yes. That's my family. The room erupted in murmurs. Why is he here? Someone called out. That's a fair question, Naomi said calmly. And I'm going to let him answer it. All eyes turned to Elliot. He stood slowly, visibly nervous. I'm here, he began, his voice shaking slightly, because I did something unforgivable. I stood by and watched as my family humiliated Ms. Ashford. And I did nothing to stop it. The room was silent. I'm not here to ask for your forgiveness, Elliot continued. I don't deserve it. I'm here because I'm trying to learn, to do better, and because Ms. Ashford believed I was capable of change, even when I didn't believe it myself. A young man in a wheelchair, maybe 17, with sharp eyes and sharper skepticism, spoke up. So what you're like our token white savior now? A few people laughed, but it wasn't friendly. Elliot shook his head. No, I'm not here to save anyone. I'm here to serve, to listen, to use whatever privilege I have left to open doors, and then get out of the way. Why should we trust you? The young woman with the prosthetic leg asked. You shouldn't, Elliot said honestly. Not yet. Trust is earned. And I'm just starting that work. There was a long pause. Then an older woman in the back, maybe 60, in a motorized wheelchair, spoke. Ms. Ashford, you trust him? Naomi considered the question carefully. I'm watching him, she said. And so far he's shown up. He's listened. He's done the work without asking for credit. But trust. That's something he'll have to earn from each of you individually. The older woman nodded. Fair enough. She turned to Elliot. You mess this up, we'll know. And we'll make sure everyone else knows too. Elliot nodded. Understood. Good, the woman said. Now sit down and listen. For the next 2 hours, Elliot did exactly that. He listened as young people shared their stories. The barriers they'd faced. The dreams they'd been told to abandon. The systems that had failed them. A 15-year-old girl talked about being denied accommodations at school because her disability was invisible. A 23-year-old man described being rejected from job after job because employers saw his wheelchair before his resume. A 19-year-old non-binary person shared how they'd been kicked out of their home for being both disabled and queer. Elliot took notes, asked questions, and when he didn't understand something, he admitted it instead of pretending. By the end of the meeting, the hostility in the room had softened, not into trust, but into cautious curiosity. As people filed out, the young woman with the prosthetic leg approached Elliot. I'm Kendra, she said. Elliot. He extended his hand. She shook it, her grip firm. You did okay tonight. Thanks, Elliot said. I was terrified. I could tell. Kendra smiled slightly. But you didn't run. That counts for something. I appreciate that. Kendra studied him. Why are you really doing this? And don't give me the PR answer. The real reason. Elliot thought about it. Because I don't want to be the person I was, he said quietly. The person who looked at someone like Ms. Ashford and saw a problem instead of a person. I don't want to be complicit anymore. Kendra nodded slowly. Okay. I'll be watching. I hope so, Elliot said. She walked away, and Elliot felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not pride, but purpose. On the drive back to Manhattan, Naomi and Elliot sat in comfortable silence. Finally, Elliot spoke. That was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Naomi glanced at him. Harder than the press conference. Different, Elliot said. At the press conference, I was talking at people. Tonight, I had to sit with them. Listen to them. Feel the weight of what my ignorance has cost. And I'm grateful for it, Elliot said. Even though it hurt. Naomi smiled faintly. Good pain builds good people. Someone wise tell you that? Yeah, Naomi said softly. Her name was June. Elliot nodded, sensing the sacredness of the name. They drove in silence for a while longer. Then Naomi said, You're going to keep showing up, aren't you? Every time, Elliot promised. For as long as you'll let me. Good, Naomi said. Because this is just the beginning. That night, Naomi sat in her apartment and opened an email from Simone Crawford, the adaptive clothing designer. Subject: Thank you. Ms. Ashford. I just heard the news. I don't have the words to express what this funding means to me. For the first time in my life, someone saw my dream and said yes instead of maybe someday. Thank you for believing in me. I won't let you down. Simone. Naomi smiled, tears prickling her eyes. This was why she'd built the fund. Not for revenge, but for hope. And across town, Margaret Whitmore sat in her small apartment, watching a recorded live stream of the community meeting Naomi and Elliot had attended. She watched her son listen. Really listen. And for the first time in months, Margaret felt something other than shame. She felt pride. Not in who the Whitmores had been, but in who Elliot was becoming. And she whispered to herself, maybe it's not too late for me either. 6 months after the gala, the Serenity Fund Annual Summit was supposed to be Naomi's crowning achievement. A full-day event at the Javits Center in Manhattan, celebrating the fund's first year. Over 2,000 attendees, entrepreneurs, activists, disabled community leaders, grant recipients whose lives had been transformed by the fund's support. The energy was electric, hopeful, joyful. Naomi had spent weeks preparing her keynote speech, refining every word until it felt true. She'd invited several grant recipients to share their stories on stage. She'd even convinced Dr. Lorraine Bennett to serve as the opening speaker. Everything was perfect. Until it wasn't. The trouble started 3 days before the summit. Naomi was in her office when Claudia burst through the door, her face pale, her tablet clutched to her chest. "We have a problem," Claudia said. Naomi looked up from her laptop. "What kind of problem?" Claudia set the tablet on Naomi's desk and pulled up a news article. The headline made Naomi's blood run cold. Whitmore family sues Zenith Global for $11 billion. Claims illegal contract termination. Naomi's hands stilled on her keyboard. "What?" "Vanessa," Claudia said, her voice tight with fury. "She convinced some of the Whitmore board members to file a lawsuit claiming you terminated the merger contract without proper cause. They're saying the termination violated fiduciary duty and demanding the full $11 billion in damages." Naomi felt the air leave her lungs. "That's insane. I had every right to cancel that deal. We know that. Our lawyers know that. But Vanessa's lawyers are arguing that your decision was emotionally motivated, not business justified, and that you cost Whitmore Global its survival out of personal vendetta." Naomi's jaw clenched. Personal vendetta? They humiliated me in front of 300 people. "I know," Claudia said. "But they're spinning it. Saying you were overly sensitive, that the incident was a misunderstanding, and that you wielded your power irresponsibly." Naomi's hands began to shake. She can't. "She already did," Claudia interrupted gently. "The lawsuit was filed yesterday. It's public now. And it's everywhere." Naomi grabbed the tablet and scrolled through the article, her heart pounding. The piece quoted Vanessa directly. "Ms. Ashford is a brilliant businesswoman, but her decision to destroy an entire company over a social faux pas shows a dangerous lack of judgment. Thousands of Whitmore Global employees lost their jobs because she couldn't separate personal feelings from professional responsibility." Naomi felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. "Where's Elliot?" she asked tightly. "Does he know about this?" "He texted me an hour ago," Claudia said. "He had no idea. Vanessa didn't tell him. Margaret didn't know either." The lawsuit was filed by a subset of former board members, people who lost money when the company collapsed. And Vanessa's leading it. "Yes." Naomi set the tablet down and closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. "The summit," she said quietly. "This is going to overshadow everything." "Not if we control the narrative," Claudia said. "We put out a statement. We let our lawyers handle it. We don't let Vanessa steal your moment." Naomi opened her eyes. She already has. That evening, Naomi sat alone in her apartment, staring out at the city lights. Her phone had been buzzing non-stop, reporters, lawyers, board members, colleagues all wanting statements, strategy sessions, responses. She'd ignored all of them. Because the truth was, Vanessa's lawsuit had cracked something open inside her that she'd been trying to keep sealed. Doubt. Not about her decision to cancel the deal. She'd do that again in a heartbeat. But about whether she'd ever be allowed to simply be. To exist without constantly defending her humanity, her decisions, her right to take up space. She was exhausted. Bone deep, soul-tired exhausted. Her phone buzzed again. This time she looked. A text from Elliot. "Naomi, I just found out. I'm horrified. Vanessa did this without consulting me or my mother. I've already contacted my lawyer to see if I can intervene. This is unconscionable. I'm so sorry. Elliot. Naomi stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed back, "It's not your fault. But I need space right now." She turned off her phone completely and sat in the silence alone. The next morning, Naomi almost canceled the summit. She sat in bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining the fallout. The reporters who would ask about the lawsuit instead of the fund. The whispers. The judgment. The people who would look at her and see not a CEO, but a woman who overreacted. It would be easier to cancel. To release a statement saying she needed time to focus on the legal battle. No one would blame her. A soft knock at her bedroom door interrupted her spiral. Naomi. Claudia's voice. "Can I come in?" "Yeah." Claudia entered, carrying a tray with tea and toast. She set it on the nightstand and sat on the edge of the bed. "You thinking about canceling?" she asked gently. "How'd you know?" "Because I know you." Claudia smiled sadly. "And I know that when things get hard, your instinct is to protect yourself by withdrawing." Naomi looked at her. "Is that so wrong?" "No," Claudia said. "It's human. But it's not you." "What do you mean?" "The Naomi I know doesn't run," Claudia said. "She doesn't hide. She faces things head-on, even when it's terrifying." She paused. "Especially when it's terrifying." Naomi's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so tired, Claudia." "I know, honey. I know. I just want one moment where I'm not fighting, where I can just exist." Claudia took her hand. "Then take it. Cancel the summit if you need to. No one who matters will judge you." Naomi was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "What about the grant recipients? The people who are coming to share their stories? They'll understand. Will they?" Naomi challenged gently. "Or will they think I gave up the moment things got hard? That I let Vanessa win?" Claudia hesitated. "I don't know." Naomi closed her eyes. "I can't let her win." "Then don't." Naomi opened her eyes and looked at her best friend. "Help me get ready." 2 days later, the Javits Center was packed. Over 2,000 people filled the main hall. More than expected. The energy was tense but electric, everyone aware of the lawsuit, everyone waiting to see how Naomi would respond. Backstage, Naomi sat in her wheelchair, hands folded in her lap, breathing slowly. Dr. Bennett appeared beside her, elegant in a deep purple suit. "How are you holding up?" Dr. Bennett asked. "I don't know," Naomi admitted. "I feel like I'm about to walk into a firing squad." "Good," Dr. Bennett said. Naomi looked up, surprised. Dr. Bennett smiled. "If you weren't afraid, it would mean you didn't care. Fear means it matters." "It matters too much," Naomi whispered. "What if I mess this up? What if I say the wrong thing? What if you're brilliant?" Dr. Bennett interrupted gently. "What if you tell the truth and it sets people free? What if you give those 2,000 people out there permission to stop shrinking themselves?" Naomi's throat tightened. "You've already won, child," Dr. Bennett said. "Vanessa can file 100 lawsuits. But she can't take away what you've built. She can't erase the lives you've changed. She can't undo the fact that you turned your pain into power." Naomi nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Now go out there," Dr. Bennett said, "and remind the world who you are." When Naomi rolled onto the stage, the applause was deafening. People rose to their feet, a standing ovation before she'd even spoken a word. Naomi stopped at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. Black faces, brown faces, white faces, wheelchair users, people with canes, with prosthetics, with invisible disabilities, young and old, rich and poor, her people. She waited for the applause to die down. Then she spoke. 6 months ago, Naomi began, her voice steady and clear. I walked into a room where I wasn't welcome, where I was mocked, dehumanized, and physically removed like I was nothing. The room was silent. And in that moment, Naomi continued, I had a choice. I could shrink. I could apologize for taking up space. I could accept the world's assessment of my worth. She paused. Or I could fight back. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. I chose to fight, Naomi said. Not with violence. Not with cruelty. But with power. The power I'd built through years of hard work, sacrifice, and refusal to accept the limits other people tried to place on me. She looked directly at the cameras in the back of the room. And now some of those same people are trying to punish me for it. They've filed a lawsuit claiming I acted emotionally, irresponsibly, vindicatively. Her voice hardened. They're saying I destroyed their company out of personal vendetta. The crowd stirred, angry murmurs building. But here's the truth, Naomi said, her voice rising. I didn't destroy their company. They destroyed their company. By building it on a foundation of exclusion, exploitation, and cruelty. By refusing to evolve. By treating people like me as less than human. Applause erupted. Naomi waited for it to quiet. They want me to apologize for having power, she said. For using that power to defend my dignity. For choosing myself over their comfort. She leaned forward slightly. But I won't apologize. Not today. Not ever. The applause was thunderous now. Because this, Naomi gestured to the crowd, this is what power looks like. 2,000 people who've been told they're too much or not enough. Too disabled. Too black. Too poor. Too different. And yet here you are. Building. Creating. Thriving. Tears streamed down faces throughout the audience. So let them sue, Naomi said. Let them try to tear me down. Because they can't take this away. She placed a hand over her heart. They can't take us away. The crowd rose to their feet again, cheering, crying, clapping until their hands hurt. Naomi felt the love wash over her like a wave. And then, from the wings, she saw him. Elliot Whitmore. He was standing just off stage, tears streaming down his face, clapping as hard as anyone. Their eyes met. And Naomi saw something in his expression that made her chest tighten. Anguish. Because he knew. He knew that no matter how much work he did, no matter how much he changed, his family's name would always carry this weight. And there was nothing he could do to fix it. After the speech, backstage was chaos. Press. Supporters. Grant recipients wanting to thank Naomi personally. But Elliot waited at the edge of the crowd, patient and quiet. When Naomi finally had a moment, she rolled over to him. You shouldn't be here, she said softly. I know, Elliot replied. But I needed you to know, I'm fighting this. The lawsuit. My lawyers are filing an injunction. I'm divesting completely from anything connected to Vanessa or the old board. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do, Elliot said firmly. Because what she's doing is wrong. And I won't be complicit. Not again. Naomi studied him. This is going to cost you. I know, Elliot said. But some things are worth more than money. Before Naomi could respond, a commotion erupted near the entrance. Both of them turned. Vanessa Whitmore stood at the security checkpoint, arguing with guards, a news crew trailing behind her. I have every right to be here. Vanessa was shouting. This is a public event. Naomi's hands tightened on her wheels. Claudia appeared instantly. Want me to have her removed? Naomi's first instinct was yes. But then she saw the cameras. And she understood. Vanessa wanted a confrontation. A spectacle. Something she could spin into victimhood. No, Naomi said quietly. Let her in. Claudia's eyes widened. Naomi. Let her in, Naomi repeated. I'm done running from her. Claudia hesitated, then nodded and signaled to security. Vanessa swept through the doors, cameras following, her expression one of calculated determination. She marched straight toward Naomi. The crowd parted, and when Vanessa stopped a few feet away, the entire room went silent. Ms. Ashford, Vanessa said, her voice dripping with false politeness. I thought we should talk. Publicly. Clear the air. Naomi met her gaze, unflinching. There's nothing to clear, Naomi said calmly. You humiliated me. I responded. And now you're trying to punish me for it. I'm trying to hold you accountable, Vanessa shot back. You cost thousands of people their jobs. You cost them their jobs, Naomi interrupted, her voice sharp, by building a company culture so toxic that one viral moment destroyed it. Don't put that on me. Vanessa's facade cracked. You think you're untouchable now, don't you? That you can destroy lives and call it justice. No, Naomi said quietly. I think I'm human. And I think you still can't accept that. Vanessa's face twisted with rage. And then she did something unforgivable. She reached out, just like at the gala, and grabbed Naomi's wheelchair. The room gasped. But this time Naomi was ready. She locked her wheels instantly, grabbed Vanessa's wrist, and looked her dead in the eye. Don't ever touch me again. Vanessa tried to pull away, but Naomi's grip was iron. You lost, Naomi said, her voice low and lethal. Not because I'm vindictive, but because you're cruel. And cruelty doesn't win anymore. She released Vanessa's wrist. Vanessa stumbled backward, her face red, her eyes wild. Security moved in. Ma'am, you need to leave, one guard said firmly. Vanessa looked around, at the cameras, at the crowd, at Elliot standing beside Naomi, and realized she'd lost. Again. She turned and fled, the news crew scrambling to follow. And the room erupted in applause. That night, Naomi sat alone in her apartment, watching the footage go viral. Hashtag Naomi Ashford. Hashtag she won. Hashtag don't touch her. The videos had millions of views. The lawsuit was being torn apart in the press. Vanessa was being dragged across every platform. But Naomi didn't feel victorious. She felt exhausted. Her phone buzzed. A text from Elliot. You were magnificent today. Thank you for not giving up. Hey. Naomi smiled faintly. Then another text came through. This one from Margaret. I watched your speech. I wept through all of it. You are everything I should have been. Thank you for existing. Margaret. Naomi stared at the message for a long time. Then she set her phone down and whispered to the empty room. I'm still here. Still standing. Still unbreakable. And for the first time in months, she believed it. 3 days after the summit, the lawsuit was falling apart. Vanessa's legal team had filed motions, but Zenith Global's attorneys, armed with ironclad contract language, video evidence of the gala incident, and expert testimony about Naomi's fiduciary responsibilities, were systematically dismantling every argument. Legal analysts on cable news were calling it frivolous. Business journals labeled it reputation suicide. Even some of the former Whitmore board members who'd initially signed on were quietly withdrawing their names, distancing themselves from Vanessa's vendetta. But Naomi wasn't celebrating. She sat in her apartment, staring at her laptop, reading and rereading an email that had arrived that morning. It was from Margaret Whitmore. Subject: a request I don't deserve. Dear Naomi, I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I know that every moment of your time is precious and that I have already taken too much from you. But I'm writing to ask if you would be willing to meet with me one more time. Not for my sake, though I admit I am deeply selfish in wanting it, but because I have something I need to give you. Something that belonged to you all along, but that I only recently found. If you say no, I will understand. I will respect your boundary and never contact you again. But if you say yes, I will be waiting. With deepest respect and unending gratitude, Margaret Whitmore. Naomi had read the email at least 20 times. Each time, she felt the same pull of conflicting emotions. Curiosity, suspicion, exhaustion, and something else, something softer that she didn't want to name. Compassion. You're thinking about going, Claudia said from the couch, not looking up from her tablet. Naomi turned her wheelchair toward her. How do you know? Because you've been staring at that screen for 40 minutes and you haven't closed it. Claudia finally looked up. And because you have that look. What look? The one that says you're about to do something generous that might hurt you. Naomi sighed. Am I that predictable? Only to people who love you. Claudia set her tablet aside. Do you want my advice? Always. Don't go. Naomi blinked, surprised. Really? Really? Claudia's expression was serious. Naomi, you've given that woman more grace than she deserved. You met with her. You listened to her. You gave her space to apologize. You even let Elliot into the fund. She paused. But you don't owe her closure. You don't owe her healing. And you sure as hell don't owe her whatever mysterious something she thinks she needs to give you. What if it's important? Then she can mail it, Claudia said flatly. Naomi smiled despite herself. You're very protective. Someone has to be. Claudia's voice softened. You're always taking care of everyone else. Who's taking care of you? The question hung in the air. Naomi looked down at her hands. I don't know. Then let me, Claudia said. Let me tell you that it's okay to say no. That you don't have to keep opening yourself up to people who've hurt you just because they've had some kind of awakening. But what if she really has changed? Naomi asked quietly. Then she'll prove it through her actions over time, Claudia replied. Not by asking for one more meeting, one more moment of your attention, one more piece of your heart. Naomi was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I'm going to meet her. Claudia closed her eyes. Of course you are. But you're coming with me, Naomi added. And if it feels wrong at any point, we leave. No explanation. No apology. We just leave. Claudia opened her eyes. Deal. 2 days later, Naomi sat in the lobby of a small, quiet cafe in Brooklyn. It wasn't the kind of place the old Margaret Whitmore would have chosen. No white tablecloths, no sommeliers, no velvet ropes. Just simple wooden tables, good coffee, and walls covered in art by local students. The door opened, and Margaret Whitmore stepped inside. She looked different again. Her hair was no longer perfectly coiffed. It was pulled back in a simple ponytail, streaks of gray more visible than Naomi remembered. She wore jeans, a plain sweater, and sneakers. No jewelry except a single silver watch. She looked like someone's grandmother, not a society matriarch. When Margaret's eyes found Naomi, her expression crumpled with relief. You came, Margaret said softly, approaching the table. I did, Naomi replied. But I don't have long. I understand. Margaret sat across from her. placing a worn leather messenger bag on the chair beside her. "Thank you. Truly." Claudia sat at a nearby table, close enough to intervene if needed, far enough to give them space. Margaret ordered a black coffee when the server came by. Naomi already had tea. For a moment, they sat in silence. Then Margaret spoke. "I've been volunteering," she said. Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Where?" "At a disability rights organization in the Bronx. The New York Alliance for Disability Justice." Margaret's hands wrapped around her coffee cup. "I started 3 months ago. Answering phones. Sorting donations. Whatever they'd let me do." "What made you choose them?" "Elliot suggested it," Margaret admitted. "He said if I wanted to understand what I'd done to you, I needed to listen to people who live with ableism every day." "And?" Naomi prompted. "And it's been the hardest, most humbling experience of my life," Margaret said. "I've heard stories that have broken my heart. I've seen barriers I never knew existed. I've watched people fight for accommodations I've taken for granted my entire life." She paused, her eyes glistening. "And I've realized something." "What?" "That I didn't just hurt you that night," Margaret said. "I've been hurting people like you my whole life. Through the buildings I owned that had no ramps. Through the companies I invested in that didn't hire disabled workers. Through the laws I supported that cut funding for accessibility programs." Her voice broke. "I've been complicit in a system that treats disabled people as expendable." Naomi said nothing, just watched her. "I can't undo that," Margaret continued. "But I can stop. And I can use whatever I have left, my connections, my name, my voice, to tear down the barriers I helped build." "Words are easy, Margaret," Naomi said quietly. "I know." Margaret reached into her messenger bag and pulled out a folder. She slid it across the table. "That's why I wanted to show you this." Naomi opened the folder. Inside were documents, legal filings, financial statements. She scanned them, her eyes widening. "You're donating the estate," Naomi said, looking up. "Not donating," Margaret corrected. "Deeding. To the New York Alliance for Disability Justice. The entire property. The house, the grounds, everything. They're going to turn it into an accessible community center and housing facility for disabled adults." Naomi stared at her. "That property is worth $12 million, Margaret finished. "I know. It's not enough. It doesn't come close to making up for what I've done. But it's something." Naomi looked back down at the documents, her throat tight. "There's more," Margaret said. She pulled out another set of papers. "I've also established a trust, separate from the Serenity Fund, dedicated specifically to accessibility retrofitting. Any building owner in New York can apply for grants to install ramps, elevators, accessible bathrooms. The trust is funded with what's left of my personal savings. About $4 million. Naomi's hands trembled slightly as she held the documents. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because I wanted you to know that I'm not just sorry," Margaret said. "I'm different. And I wanted you to see proof." Naomi set the papers down. "You didn't need my approval to do this." "No," Margaret agreed. "But I wanted you to witness it. To know that you changed me. That your refusal to accept my cruelty forced me to become someone better." Silence settled between them. Then Naomi said, "What do you want from me, Margaret?" Margaret looked at her, tears streaming down her face now. "I want you to know that you mattered," she said. "That what happened to you mattered. That you weren't just some incident I had to manage. You were a human being I hurt. And I see that now." Her voice broke completely. "And I want to say I'm sorry. One more time. Not because I think it fixes anything, but because you deserve to hear it. Naomi felt tears prickling at her own eyes. I'm sorry, Margaret whispered. For every moment I made you feel less than. For every time I looked past you instead of at you. For treating you like you were broken when you were whole. Naomi closed her eyes, letting the words wash over her. When she opened them, she said, I forgive you. Margaret gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Not because you've earned it, Naomi clarified, but because I'm tired of carrying the weight of your guilt. It's yours to carry now. Margaret nodded, sobbing quietly. But forgiveness doesn't mean trust, Naomi continued. Trust is earned over years, not months. So if you're serious about this, about changing, then you do the work. Not for applause. Not for redemption. Just because it's right. I will, Margaret promised. I swear to you I will. Naomi studied her for a long moment. Then she extended her hand across the table. Margaret looked at it stunned. Then, carefully, reverently, she took it. They sat there, hands clasped. Two women separated by everything except this one fragile moment of understanding. Thank you, Margaret whispered. Naomi squeezed her hand once, then let go. Don't thank me, she said. Thank the people you're helping. They're the ones who matter. After Margaret left, Claudia moved to Naomi's table. You okay? She asked gently. Naomi nodded, wiping her eyes. Yeah, I think I am. That was generous. Or stupid, Naomi said with a weak smile. No, Claudia said firmly. It was powerful. You gave her accountability and grace. That's rare. Naomi looked down at the documents Margaret had left. She's really doing it, she murmured. She's really changing. It looks like it. Do you think it'll last? Claudia considered. I think she'll have bad days. I think she'll mess up. But I also think she's scared enough of becoming who she was that she'll keep trying. Naomi nodded slowly. Then her phone buzzed. A text from Elliot. My mother just told me about the meeting. Thank you for giving her another chance. I know you didn't have to. You're changing our family in ways I can't put into words. Hey. Naomi smiled and typed back. I didn't do it for your family. I did it for mine. For the world I want to build. But I'm glad it helped. A moment later, another text. That's exactly why it mattered. That night, Naomi sat at her desk, writing in her journal. Today I forgave someone who didn't deserve it. Not because they'd earned absolution, but because I deserved peace. For so long I thought forgiveness was weakness. That holding onto anger made me strong. But I'm learning that the strongest thing I can do is choose who I want to be. Not in reaction to others, but in service to my own healing. Margaret Whitmore will carry her guilt forever. That's not my burden. My burden is lighter now. And I'm finally free. She closed the journal and looked out the window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Margaret was beginning a new life. Elliot was doing the work. Vanessa was drowning in consequences of her own making. And Naomi? Naomi was healing. Not by forgetting, but by choosing what to carry forward and what to let go. Meanwhile, across the city, Vanessa sat alone in her penthouse apartment. The lawsuit was crumbling. Her reputation was in ruins. Her divorce from Elliot was nearly finalized. She'd lost everything. And unlike her former mother-in-law, she had learned nothing. She scrolled through her phone, reading the comments tearing her apart, and felt only rage. They don't understand, she told herself. I was right. She overreacted. She's playing victim. But deep down, in a place she refused to acknowledge, a small voice whispered, You're wrong. And you're alone because of it." Vanessa silenced the voice with another glass of wine, and sat in the dark, refusing to change. And in the Bronx, at the New York Alliance for Disability Justice, a staff member opened an email. It was from Margaret Whitmore. Subject: Estate donation. Final papers enclosed. The staff member read it, then read it again. Then they stood up and shouted across the office, "We just got $12 million. The room erupted in cheers. And somewhere Naomi smiled. Because justice, it turned out, wasn't just about retribution. It was about transformation. Naomi chose forgiveness, not because it was easy, but because holding on to anger was harder. Have you ever forgiven someone who hurt you deeply? Or decided not to? Tell me in the comments. What did that choice cost you, and what did it give you? I want to hear your story. 1 year after the gala, the morning sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Naomi's Tribeca apartment, painting everything in shades of gold and warmth. The space had changed subtly over the past year. Softened, somehow. A few plants sat on the windowsill now, thriving under her care. Framed photos lined the bookshelf. Naomi with Dr. Bennett at the summit. Naomi and Claudia laughing at some long-forgotten joke. Naomi cutting the ribbon at the grand opening of the former Whitmore estate, now the Whitmore Accessibility Center. And one new photo taken just last month. Naomi on stage at the United Nations, delivering a keynote on disability rights and economic empowerment. She'd come a long way. They all had. Naomi sat at her dining table, sipping coffee and scrolling through the morning news on her tablet. The lawsuit had been dismissed 6 months ago, thrown out with prejudice, meaning Vanessa couldn't refile. Vanessa herself had gone silent, retreating from public life entirely after her reputation had been thoroughly dismantled. Some people whispered she'd moved to Europe. Others said she was in rehab. Naomi didn't care either way. Vanessa was no longer her concern. Her phone buzzed. A text from Elliot. "Morning. Still on for the site visit today? The kids are excited to meet you. Hey." Naomi smiled and typed back. "Wouldn't miss it. See you at 2. Elliot had been true to his word. Over the past year, he'd worked quietly and relentlessly with the Serenity Fund, helping to distribute over $9 billion in grants to more than 3,000 entrepreneurs, nonprofits, and community organizations. He'd learned to listen more than he spoke. He'd built genuine relationships with people who had every reason to distrust him. And slowly, he'd earned a measure of respect. Not redemption. Respect was harder. But he'd earned it. And today, Naomi was visiting one of the programs he'd helped launch, a tech skills training center for disabled youth in Harlem. At 2 p.m., Naomi rolled into the bright, bustling space of the Apex Academy. The walls were covered in murals. Vibrant, hopeful images of young people coding, designing, creating. Adaptive workstations lined the room, each one tailored to different needs. Adjustable desks, voice-activated software, ergonomic keyboards, screen readers. And at the center of it all, 20 teenagers, mostly black and brown, all disabled in some way, sat at computers, their faces lit with concentration and joy. Elliot stood near the entrance, talking to one of the instructors. When he saw Naomi, his face broke into a genuine smile. "You made it," he said, walking over. "Of course," Naomi replied. "You think I'd miss seeing this?" Elliot's smile widened. "Come on. Let me introduce you." He led her through the space, introducing her to students one by one. There was Kendra, the young woman with the prosthetic leg who'd challenged Elliot at that first community meeting a year ago. She was now a lead student mentor, teaching coding to younger kids. "Ms. Ashford," Kendra said, grinning. "You're basically a legend here." Naomi laughed. "I'm just a person who got mad and did something about it." Yeah, well, that's what legends do, Kendra said. There was Jamal, a 17-year-old wheelchair user who was building an app to help people find accessible restaurants and businesses in real time. I got the idea after trying to find a place to eat with my friends and realizing half the spots on Google Maps lied about being accessible, Jamal explained. So I'm fixing it. That's incredible, Naomi said. Have you applied for a Serenity Fund grant? Jamal's eyes widened. I didn't think I was ready. You are, Naomi said firmly. Apply. I'll make sure it gets reviewed. Jamal looked like he might cry. And there was Amara, no relation, just a coincidence. A 15-year-old girl with cerebral palsy who used a communication device and was designing adaptive gaming controllers. Naomi spent extra time with her, asking about her designs, her inspiration, her dreams. When Amara typed out, "I want to make gaming accessible for everyone," Naomi felt her heart swell. "Then you will," Naomi said. "And I'll be cheering you on." After the tour, Naomi and Elliot sat in a small office at the back of the center. "This place is amazing," Naomi said. "You should be proud." "I didn't build it," Elliot said quickly. "The community did. I just helped fund it." "That's still something." Elliot looked down at his hands. "I keep waiting for it to feel like enough. Like I've done enough to make up for," he trailed off. "It'll never be enough," Naomi said gently. "That's not how this works." Elliot looked up, startled. "You can't erase what happened," Naomi continued. "You can't undo the harm your family caused, not just to me, but to countless others over generations. That weight doesn't disappear because you've done some good." Elliot's face fell. "But," Naomi added, "that doesn't mean the good doesn't matter." "It does. The kids in this building, they don't care about your last name. They care that you showed up, that you listened, that you helped create something that's changing their lives." She paused. "So no, it's not enough. But it's something. And something is how change happens." Elliot nodded slowly, absorbing the words. "Thank you. For not giving up on me." "I didn't do it for you," Naomi said honestly. "I did it because I needed to believe people could change. And you proved they could." Elliot smiled, sad but genuine. "I won't stop. You know that, right?" "I know. Even after the fund is done, even after all the grants are distributed, I'm going to keep doing this work." "Good," Naomi said. "Because the work is never done." That evening, Naomi attended a private dinner at a small Brooklyn restaurant. It wasn't a business meeting or a fundraiser. It was a gathering of the people who'd walked this journey with her. Claudia sat to her right, laughing at something Dr. Lorraine Bennett said across the table. Elliot was there, talking quietly with Kendra, who'd been invited as a representative of the youth programs. Margaret Whitmore sat near the end of the table, still somewhat separate, still earning her place but present. She listened more than she spoke, her eyes occasionally meeting Naomi's with quiet gratitude. And beside Naomi sat Simone Crawford, the adaptive clothing designer whose line had just been featured in Vogue. She'd brought prototypes of her latest collection. Gorgeous, functional pieces that made Naomi's heart sing. "Try this on later," Simone said, handing Naomi a deep green blazer. "I designed it specifically with wheelchair users in mind. No bunching in the back, reinforced elbows, hidden pockets." Naomi ran her fingers over the fabric. "It's beautiful." "You're beautiful," Simone corrected with a grin. "The blazer just knows how to frame it." Everyone laughed. As the evening wore on, the conversation shifted from business to life, to dreams, to the small victories and quiet joys that made the fight worth it. At one point, Dr. Bennett raised her glass. "I'd like to propose a toast," she said. The table quieted. "To Naomi," Dr. Bennett continued, her voice warm and strong, who took her pain and turned it into power, who refused to shrink when the world tried to break her, and who reminded all of us that grace and accountability are not opposites, they're partners. To Naomi, everyone echoed, raising their glasses. Naomi felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "But this isn't just my victory. It's ours. Every person at this table fought for something, gave something, changed something." She looked around at each of them. Claudia, who's been my rock since day one. Dr. Bennett, who showed me what legacy looks like. Elliot, who chose transformation over comfort. Margaret, who's doing the hardest work of all, unlearning a lifetime of harm. Kendra, who's leading the next generation. Simone, who's proving that fashion can be inclusive and fierce. She paused, her voice thickening with emotion. "A year ago, I thought power meant destroying my enemies. But you all taught me something better." "What's that?" Claudia asked gently. "That real power," Naomi said, "is building something so beautiful, so transformative, that it makes the old world irrelevant." The table was silent for a moment. Then Kendra spoke up. "Ms. Ashford, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you ever regret it?" Kendra asked. "Canceling the deal? Going through all of this?" Naomi considered the question carefully. "No," she said finally. "I don't regret it. Because if I'd stayed silent, if I'd let them humiliate me and just moved on, I would have lost something more important than money." "What?" "Myself," Naomi said simply. "My sense of worth. My belief that I deserved to take up space." She smiled. "And I refuse to live in a world where my dignity is negotiable." Kendra nodded, her eyes shining. "I want to be like you when I grow up." Naomi reached across the table and took her hand. "You already are," she said. "You just don't know it yet." Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Naomi sat alone in her apartment. She opened her laptop and pulled up a document she'd been working on for months. A memoir. She'd resisted writing it at first. Didn't want to relive the pain, didn't want to modify her trauma. But then she'd realized, her story wasn't just hers. It belonged to every person who'd ever been dismissed, dehumanized, or made to feel invisible. And if telling it helped even one person find their voice, it was worth it. She scrolled to the final chapter, the one she'd just finished. It was titled, Unbreakable. She read the last paragraph aloud to herself. "They tried to break me. They looked at my body and saw weakness. They looked at my skin and saw inferiority. They looked at my existence and saw inconvenience. But I am not broken. I am not weak. I am not invisible. I am a black woman. I am disabled. I am powerful. And I am unbreakable." Naomi closed the laptop, tears streaming down her face. Not from sadness, but from release. She had survived. She had thrived. And she had proven to herself and to the world that she was exactly who she'd always known she was. Enough. 6 months later, Naomi stood on stage at the Kennedy Center Honors, accepting an award for her work in disability advocacy and economic empowerment. The room was filled with politicians, celebrities, activists, and leaders from every sector. But the only people Naomi saw were the ones sitting in the front row. Claudia beaming with pride. Dr. Bennett nodding approvingly. Elliot clapping so hard his hands had to hurt. Margaret crying openly. And Kendra, Jamal, Amara, and a dozen other young people from the programs the Serenity Fund had supported. Her people. Her family. Naomi rolled to the microphone and spoke. "When I was 23, she began, a drunk driver changed my life forever. I lost the use of my legs. I lost the future I'd imagined. I lost the belief that the world was built for people like me. The room was silent. But I didn't lose myself, Naomi continued. I didn't lose my voice. And I didn't lose my power. She paused. Over the past year, I've learned that power isn't about dominance. It's not about winning or destroying your enemies. It's about using what you have, your resources, your platform, your pain, to build something that outlives you. She looked at the young people in the front row. This award isn't mine, she said. It belongs to every person who's ever been told they're too disabled, too black, too poor, too different to matter. It belongs to everyone who refused to believe that lie. She smiled, tears in her eyes. And it belongs to the next generation, who won't have to fight as hard as we did, because we're tearing down the barriers now. The room erupted in applause. Naomi raised the award above her head. And in that moment she felt it. Not victory. Not vindication. Peace. Epilogue. 5 years later, the Whitmore Accessibility Center had become a model for inclusive community spaces across the country. The Serenity Fund had distributed over $15 billion, supporting more than 10,000 entrepreneurs and changing countless lives. Elliot Whitmore had founded his own nonprofit, Second Chances Coalition, focused on restorative justice and accountability. Margaret Whitmore had become a sought-after speaker on privilege, complicity, and transformation. Vanessa Whitmore had quietly started therapy and was, by all accounts, working on herself, though she remained out of the public eye. And Naomi Ashford? She'd published her memoir, which became a #1 New York Times bestseller. She'd been named one of Time's 100 most influential people. She'd testified before Congress on disability rights. And she'd mentored hundreds of young disabled entrepreneurs, many of whom had gone on to build their own empires. But the thing she was proudest of? A small bronze statue that now stood in the lobby of Zenith Global's headquarters. It depicted a woman in a wheelchair, head held high, hands resting confidently on the wheels. The plaque beneath it read, "In honor of those who refuse to be broken, in memory of those who paved the way, in hope for those who will rise next." Naomi visited it often. And every time she did, she whispered the same words. I did it. We did it. And somewhere, maybe in memory, maybe in spirit, June whispered back, I always knew you would. Naomi Ashford didn't just cancel an $11 billion deal. She canceled the idea that cruelty goes unanswered. She canceled the belief that dignity is optional. She canceled the lie that some bodies matter less than others. And in its place, she built a legacy. One of grace and accountability. Of power wielded with precision. Of transformation born from pain. She proved that you don't have to choose between justice and compassion. That holding people accountable is an act of love. And that the most revolutionary thing you can do is refuse to shrink, no matter who tells you to. This is Naomi's story. This is a story of resilience, resistance, and redemption. This is what it looks like when an unbreakable woman changes the world.